Okay, Sarah, the Alchemist. What a treat this is. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me. I feel like I won like the podcast Oscars.
Oh my God, this is such an honor because I'm a huge fan of your channel. I love the information that you convey, and we've done two collaborations now, which I love. And by the time this podcast comes out, that collaboration will be out. And that video is about timeline splits, how humans are moving into two different dimensions. And I wanted to start by getting your take on how you see this playing out.
Yeah, so I see it playing out as one of the steps inside the alchemical process of purification. All of them, really, even the steps in alchemy that are about combining and union, they're still about some form of purification. So, alchemy is the art of purification. So, what we're going to see is a lot of purifying because the ego state, or what's known as like base metal or base consciousness, is what's being purified. And those aspects that that won't survive that purification, literally the aspects that are meant through the alchemical process, they're purposely designed to be dissolved, to go away. That's why in alchemy the greatest axiom is solvet coag. It's because it's all about dissolving, separating. And then the next step is to recombine again. And when it recombines, it's at that higher order. It's in a more purified and what we would know in this age as coherent. It's in a more coherent state. It's unified. So what we're going to see is a lot of people in any type of arena, in all sort, whether it's the religious arena or spiritual arena or especially political arena, and then every other arena that you can think of and that you can name that's inside on the world stage, on the world theater. We're just going to see a complete calcination, which is a complete meltdown. Because what's happening is that all of the things that are more identified with ego, that are more concerned with being rewarded for whatever ego they have, and more concerned with their own agenda, is what is being purified and will not make that timeline shift towards the higher timeline.
Yes. Does one need the other? Like, does the Great Awakening need the Great Reset to happen?
That's a very large perception. So one, that's the type of thinking that will lead a person to their own evolution. That's a great way of looking at it. Seeing how, wait a second, is it all just one thing the whole time? And that's what also alchemy is about. It's paradoxically unifying the other through that opposite, through that oppositional force. So what that would mean by what you said is that consciousness is what will allow a person to actually exalt those two concepts of the Great Awakening and the Great Reset. They become interdependent because it's actually an act of mercy, but it's also divine chemistry. That act of mercy is the people who aren't, who require those catalysts of the Great Reset are given that opportunity to awaken through that. So it's interdependent so long as a person still needs that catalyst. They need more contrast in order to become more unified. Some people don't need that contrast. I actually don't live in a timeline where there is a great reset. And I have to, as an act of mercy, remove myself from some of my teachings and dial into the timeline where there is a great reset so I can teach them at that level and at that frequency.
So how have you been able to step out of this whole matrix, this timeline?
By being open.
Yeah.
I I have questioned everything for as long as I can remember. And to be honest, it wasn't just in this lifetime. But I don't think that that's unfair for me to say, well, I already came in awakened, because many people came in awakened. And I would argue that it is more natural in this age to have come from lifetimes of mastery. So because of that, there's very few who are starting off at square one. So the things that we have already mastered in past lives play a heavy role in determining our curriculum for this life. And so one of the things that just wasn't that hard of a curriculum for me was being open enough to receive conflicting information or conflicting knowledge, or knowledge that was opposing my current belief systems. And that's why I get feedback sometimes from people agitated by how confident I am in my knowing. But if a person knew that it wasn't my knowing, my will, if they knew that it's the journey that I have always shifted, I have always changed based off of what I now found more true. So I would say, to answer your question, being open. And also I had certain catalysts that I feel like I came into this life purposely for my purpose. And one of them was a lot of oppression. So it's easier. This is just a fact of this reality. It's easier for somebody to seek deviation from the norm, aka expansion or evolution, when they are more oppressed. In that way, you see oppressive, and I don't want to say privileged because that's such a charged word now. It's been co-opted, but you see less oppressed, because I feel everyone has that in their soul stream. Playing it out. And sometimes, especially in Eastern mysticism, they teach this. It's sometimes harder for the less oppressed to awaken, because the ones that are being more overtly oppressed seek it, or they're already seeking some sort of new terminology, some sort of new context. Does this make sense?
Totally. Yeah. It's like the universe has to make you uncomfortable for you to change. You know, if you're really comfortable, you're going to cling to whatever reality we're currently in. And
yes.
Yeah, I love how confident you are, though, in delivering your messages. And I guess I wanted to back up and ask you, like, where do you get your information from?
Yeah, I'm so glad I'm getting asked this, because I don't want to make another video about it. So I made a video, where do I get my information from? But I'm claircognizant. And that's kind of what I was alluding to when I said, like, I came in awakened. I'm not saying I came in fully figured out. I'm not. I'm still always growing. I still am always learning discernment and everything. But I came in claircognizant, highly claircognizant.
What does that mean?
And I have... Claircognizant is a strong knowing. It comes, if we are looking at it from the energy center point of view, it's coming like from straight up the crown chakra. But the crown chakra is also known as silence. It's also the most infinite and the least definable. So because of that, I had to learn about my own way that I was receiving information, because being so open and energetically sensitive as I was, I didn't perceive it as my knowing. I perceived everything that I was getting download wise and information wise as something that I needed to fix about myself. I didn't realize that that was my knowing of others or the world. And that's actually a pitfall of people who are sensitive. They have a different way of needing to integrate than people who are not sensitive. So people who are extra sensitive actually they can attack themselves with that self-awareness if it's pointed too much inward. So once I started learning that I had claircognizance, and that the invisible information that I call knowing was not just meant to attack me, but actually a gift to share with the world. The thing that I needed to own the most was actually now just being confident and staying in my center about it. So what I've constantly gotten throughout my spirit guides or my team The message that's been one of the strongest and least changing, it's the most consistent, is just something that I meant to demonstrate in this lifetime to the world, because we all have different gifts to demonstrate. And one of them is staying in my power. One would think, what's power then? Power isn't being aggressive. It's not being, that's maybe the ego's interpretation. Power just doesn't move. It doesn't stay weak and diminish itself so that it can avoid projections or attack, but it also doesn't need to go on the defense and start attacking and being aggressive. So my guides have taught me that through my way of just staying in my power, I'm actually offering that blueprint to other people to learn how to be in their integrated power. So where do I get my information from? I get it from my knowing, claircognizance. It's very invisible. It's so invisible that it can gaslight you, because you, if you don't know the difference between a download versus just thoughts or our own projections or our own stuff that's yet to be healed, then they could look the same. So it takes quite a bit of openness, because a person has to be open enough to recognize the difference between a download and open enough to recognize the difference between their ego. And so with that, I use mysticism as a bridge, because I don't want to just have everybody expect them to just believe what I'm saying based off of, well, I'm claircognizant, and if you don't believe it, well, then you're just not enlightened. Instead, I came from a background of mysticism, a heavy background, and that has helped me tremendously with my own evolution, with my own psychic development. So what I do is I see what threads of it I resonate with. And I resonate with a lot of it, but the majority of mysticism, it has so much to pull from that I'm not sharing mysticism for the sake of mysticism. By the time somebody is watching my content on my channel, it's what I, with my own sovereignty, have chosen from all of the pull of mysticism that I align with. And then my own creative way of sharing that, and then my own gnosis about it. So that's why I can't teach on my channel saying, well, this is what this thought believed. This is what this thought believed. Because by the time it's coming out of my mouth, it's not actually representing that thread of mysticism. So it's my gnosis.
Yes, you have such a rare combination. I feel like it's rare to see somebody that's so aware be very confident. Because like you were saying, if you were hypersensitive, you're going to be constantly questioning yourself, and you're going to go inward, and that can be a very good thing, but it can also be debilitating. And
very,
yeah, I mean, I know a lot of spiritual people who are handicapped by their awareness. And I also know a lot of spiritual people that when they start talking, I kind of just roll my eyes, because I'm like, I can't take this anymore, but when your message comes, it just like, it's so direct. It really resonates with me. And I like how you don't deviate too much. Like, it's a very clear, direct line of, I'm like more of a logical person, and that I find it to be very logical in a spiritual realm, which is very, not logical. So it's a good balance between logic and emotion.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a big topic that I wanted to get into, and one I've thought about a lot is free will. And I'm curious to know, do you think that we have free will?
Absolutely. Yeah. So at a more elevated state of consciousness, this can actually be super poetic, and it could be a beautiful philosophical conversation. But unfortunately, the frequency that we as a collective talk about this concept of free will and predetermination, or I think it's predetermination is the main name it goes by. It's at too low of a frequency for this to be beautiful and poetic. We actually literally, the collective does not believe that free will exists. And that's a problem, because free will is represented as the archetype of Christ. Christ consciousness is actually the archetype, the personified force that brings free will, and how that's given is through the ability to come in and change a pattern. Because we could look at predetermination as there being no way to see past it. It's so solidified that everything looks like there's no free will. And that's when we're tapping into the lower astral plane. The lower astral plane is all about an automation. Out of all the threads of mysticism, I'd say the thread that brought this concept the clearest and strongest way is George Gurdjieff's work on the fourth way. Teaches all about how the lower astral timeline and the lower astral plane is all predetermined and automated. So because of that, it's called a machine. So in mysticism, we get this strong theme of machine and organic, machine or automation and organic. And what that's referring to is there's this predetermined realm that's automated. And that's what we know as karma. And then there's this choice, this higher realm. And there's still organization to it. So in that way, we can look at it like now this higher option isn't free will and free will alone. It's free will combined with the organizing principle of there being a fate or a destiny. So destiny still has a blueprint. There will always be a blueprint. A blueprint goes, okay, well, this is the past, present, and future trajectory of that version of you or that choice. So we're mistaking at this lower frequency of understanding predeterminism. We're mistaking the fact that because there's a blueprint at all, we think it's all written and final. But instead, there's always going to be a blueprint, even in free will. It's just a matter of consciousness breaks a person out of the predetermined, automative, reflective level of being that we know karma. So unconsciousness is stuck in karma. That's what Carl Jung said in the beautiful quote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. That's what he meant. He meant you're going to call everything predetermined if you don't actually develop a higher level of consciousness. Because in a higher level, now you go, wait a second, I can make choices. I have free will. And when you access that, it actually opens up. And now you get more free will. And then now you get more free will. So from mysticism's perception, mysticism is entirely 100% concerned with teaching the being that they are more than a machine and that they have free will and they can access more.
That was beautifully put. That was a really inspiring answer. And I'm so glad you brought up Carl Jung, because my favorite quote from him about this subject is, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And I feel like everybody is a product of their environment, that we didn't choose our genetics, our parents, where we were born, all these things. But that's not who you are. You are who you choose to become. So the past is the past. And it's like driving a car. You can steer that car wherever you want. The road might be bumpy for some people, more bumpy for some people than others, but the more you develop yourself, the more your car will be able to handle bumps and go in the direction you want to go in. And I'm curious to know your opinion on, are you seeing a growing sense that we don't have free will in our culture? Like, it seems like that idea, from what I'm observing, it seems like it's growing. This idea that we have no free will.
That's because we're in an age of Ahriman. Ahriman is the personified force in nature of calcification. So just like as I was talking about Christ consciousness being the personified force in nature, Christ consciousness actually in esoteric Christianity and in Rosicrucianism is the oversoul of human consciousness. So it's our higher aspect. And being that oversoul, it's the integration of opposites and the left and right hemispheres. So it's the center, it's the middle way. That's why it's depicted as the middle way. So when you're talking about how there's a growing trend towards predeterminism, it's because we're shifting out of one polarity to another polarity. And the Christ consciousness, once again, is the center middle way, the integration of opposites, the paradox, the awakened heart center. So when we shift ages, we have shifted into an age of Ahriman, which is the counter opposing force of integration. So all of alchemy is based off of this continuum. And the continuum is between spirit and matter. And they're not opposing, but they're just a continuum. So what we're seeing is we're moved into an age where we're all the way over on that continuum to matter. We're not in the middle, which would be alchemical. It would be the middle of spirit and matter. We're moved over for the lessons. This is for our own human evolution. We're moved over into sheer materialism. And so when I say Ahriman, that is just the name of that theme, the theme of the personified force in nature of absolute materialism. And so that's why we start seeing a bunch of spiritual knowledge twisted and conveyed now through the paradigm of Ahriman. We're just seeing it all twisted into the most materialized, aka the most calcified form that teaching can come through.
Yeah. Could you elaborate on how it's getting twisted?
Yeah. So because I like to help a person and even myself expand our consciousness, I will want to balance this perception by first saying, if it's twisted, all of creation is twisted. I'm spirit. I twisted myself enough to become a female in the third dimension named Sarah. That's my ego's name. So twisting something isn't innately wrong simply because it's a way to explore the all. So we're in an age right now that is exploring the all through the paradigm, through the filter of the most material, the most calcified way that we can interpret the all. So what that means is that instead of moving into the central point, which we will need to do, the middle way will be the only one that survives. So all of the stuff we're seeing in the world, we're seeing whether it's playing out between regions through conflict, whether it's playing out between the left hemisphere or the right hemisphere, the masculine or the feminine. All of these different themes are playing out something which is they're not going to survive. They're literally being tossed in the universal energies to clash until they break apart and dissolve. So we can look at that as the calcification. So if we're in an age that's calcifying, right? We're being over material in all of our paradigms. Then that means they're too rigid, they're too calcified to actually interpret more. They're too in the ego, the individual particle of it. So I'll give the example of free will. Free will now in this limited viewpoint, if we're exploring that theme through Ahriman or through materialization, now we're going to see that story of free will being twisted into, oh, free will doesn't exist because, and then they're going to give you some overly hyper analytical scientific reason as to why they need to diminish the concept of consciousness being able to have a say to have a choice. So calcification leads to dominance. That's why we see so many different themes in the world playing out. It's because their viewpoint has calcified, it has fully materialized. And now it's only coming from that one-dimensional perception. So if it's not free will that's being diminished and dominated now through the paradigm of no, only predeterminism exists because, and then they give you some sort of math behind it, it will be another theme. You can literally give me something and I could plug it into this equation. That's how much it's dominant within our age. And it's because we're in the age of Aquarius. So this age of calcification, it needs to break apart through conflict and chaos all the things so that the only things left are the things that could survive in a more flexible, integrated middle way state, which is what's represented as the age of Aquarius.
Yes, I really want to talk to you about the age of Aquarius. But yes, many of the smartest people I know, many people I admire, they say that there is no free will, and they try to very logically explain it away. They say it's all cause and effect, and I find that that's just in general, that's just a very disheartening way to live. You know, it's not inspiring. It's like, you know, everything's just fate. So what's the point of anything? I think it quickly leads to nihilism, atheism, nihilism. What's the point of even living? And consciousness seems to be this like giant inconvenience to them, where they try their best to explain it away. Like, you know, if there's no free will, then why are we even conscious? Why would that even be infused into the equation? And that seems to be this inconvenience for them. They try to explain it away like we're not even conscious. We're like you're saying, we're just these machines. So how do we come out of this into the age of Aquarius? Is the age of Aquarius going to be this hellscape where we're all machines, or?
No, age of Aquarius is what everyone's calling the higher timeline. They call, I don't care about words unless it's to teach people the difference. So I have taken on inside my own channel on YouTube and my teachings, I have taken on the term New Earth because it was already established. And when I tune into it, it's of the same resonance. I just didn't call it that before. So the New Earth is actually what people are calling the age of Aquarius. In past ages, this was called New Jerusalem. So that's pretty telling considering everything that's going on in the world right now. So there's this concept of moving into a more integrated age, and that's the unity consciousness. So what I love doing is helping people synthesize, teaching about paradox, because that's how the higher order of this universe works. It's through the paradoxical forces. But also I love like sharing the different ways that we understand a concept and how preserving mysticism, you know, because mysticism had the majority of this gnosis in some form already flushed out. And mysticism has its own issues, don't get me wrong. I could, if I wanted to, just bash mysticism because of all of the different really heavily biased thought forms that came from it. But in the long run, it's esoteric knowledge that was being transmitted from a person's ego. So it's not always going to come out pure. And so because of that, what the age of Aquarius is what you and I did that timeline on. It's a higher timeline option for humanity, and it's not necessarily gonna be looking like that at first, because what we will experience before that is an alchemical stage of solve et coag. Solve et coag is about separating to recombined. So that's why I keep bringing up about how the calcification is going to keep hitting itself running up into its reflection on purpose, because that's ego, and the ego is what is not going to survive. It's going to be purified into unity consciousness, and that unified consciousness is represented as integration, age of Aquarius. So that higher timeline is, we're bringing it in as we speak. It exists already as we speak. So we're just going to see now the physics of that. We're going to see the physics of that volatileness of the separation.
I think, yeah. Do you think we're seeing that play out right now in the physical world with the divisive politics? Sometimes it seems like I say something and it's on a completely different frequency than what the person can possibly hear. I was just interacting with somebody who was really upset about my video that I put out yesterday. And they said, you only presented one side of the case. And I said, well, what are you talking about? Did you see the whole video? The second half presents the other side. And it was like they couldn't comprehend that there was like another side presented. I'm like, it's right there. And I gave them a timestamp. I usually don't respond to people in the comments, but it's between these 2 minutes where we talk about the other side. And they couldn't compute that there was two sides to the argument. They only heard the one side. So
I'm dealing with that very same problem. It's to the point now where I daydream about how you invited me camping with your fiance. I'm not even kidding. I'm like, oh my God, I don't get it. And I knew that going in, because before I became a teacher, I got downloads of that path and I saw that timeline. And I knew they're going to call me very vicious names because I'm a woman and I have masculine features. They're going to call me this because I'm talking about the occult. They're going to call me this. They're not going to see it, because when I came from my fourth way background, oh, you cannot be that entitled. You won't. You will get phased out. But now I'm bringing esoteric knowledge into the exoteric, which you were never supposed to do. Even when the Kabbalah was taught, they separated them originally, Moses, into 4 different groups, and they only taught the real Kabbalah to the 4th group. All of mysticism is organized into different layers, depending on the person's own, once they demonstrate that they're, not, I'm trying not to use some bad word. Once they demonstrate basically that they're not petulant and entitled and that they can receive the information and integrate it, then they were allowed to go to the next level. And so I'm dealing with all uninitiation. And I have even started to comment back to people because if I don't, it's going to get turned into a snowball where I get called really demonic things.
Yeah, I typically say it's best to not engage, but every now and then somebody will say with complete confidence a total lie. And I'm like, wait a second. And other people will believe them. And I'm like, hold on. I got to somebody says, oh, all after school videos are made with AI. I'm like, whoa. You have to put a stop on some of these things before they snowball, like you said. But you mentioned a term that I've never heard before. You said exoteric. There's esoteric and exoteric. What is
there's even mesoteric.
Oh boy. Is it worthwhile to define what exoteric is?
Very briefly I can. And there's not much to say anyways about it. Exoteric is kind of like the exoskeleton of a creature. It's when their skeletons are based on their outside. So exoteric sphere means the mainstream. That's why what we really see in the world today is the exoteric realm melting. They're melting. The only thing that will survive is whatever a person can integrate and turn internally. And that's what esoteric means. Esoteric means inner, hidden dimensions of knowledge. So when you hear a teaching on the exoteric level, it is so blasphemized, it is so profaned and twisted that it hardly resembles the true esoteric nature. So me and a few other mystics have decided that the hell with it. Let the cards fall where they may. Get the information out. Don't go through some sort of initiation hipster process. Those were in different ages. Now it's a free-for-all on purpose. It's because we're at a crucial choice point. So what I'm dealing with, and what it sounds like you're dealing with, is you're dealing with a lot of petulance and entitledness that doesn't know it. They just expect whatever they perceive or they want to project to be whatever you fit into or whatever the information is. And so that's called cognitive dissonance. And, I have, when I remove myself far enough, a lot of compassion for that. That's why I'm here. That's even why you're here, whether you are aware of it or not, whether you own it or not, you're a huge pillar of health and consciousness.
Well, thank you.
So you are.
Appreciate it. So are you. Yeah.
Thank you. And in more than just one way, even with your divine masculinity. And so with that, we're dealing with a lot of the exoteric nature, which is to assume, belittle, diminish, or simply just assume, twist something to sound very confident. So I've just developed a lot of ways to keep my own health and sanity. Like I don't want to go too much into it now, but like I will block people who just accuse me of really awful things, because I'm not going to let somebody come into my work, which I work hard on my content, and then just accuse me of whatever they feel like because of their projections and then walk out of my house. No. So I've just started really creating boundaries for my own sanity while I'm still sharing the knowledge.
Well, thank you for saying that. That means a lot coming from you. And I loved how you called it the uninitiation. I think that's such a fitting term, because I'll see comments that are really hateful, like just super mean, hateful. And then they'll say, I'm unsubscribing. And I'm like, well, thank you. I mean, you're kind of doing me a favor. And I do type back snarky comments sometimes. I'm like, oh, that sucks. You seem so nice, or something like, And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you have, switch off, observer and observed. Sometimes I feel like you almost, even though you don't talk about like blatantly provoking things that I talk about, like blatantly, you have this really interesting form of challenges, because you have such a large platform, and I normally see people with that large of a platform crystallize. But in that sense, you're what one could consider a true alpha, because you don't care about if other people are pretending to be something, or you don't care if other people think that's what something should be. You literally can hold and maintain as much as you. I don't even know all of your stuff, but I've seen your content and I've subscribed, so I see the topics you talk about, even if I don't watch the videos. You can hold so much of a larger objective perception that when you're sharing something, it might not represent everyone ever, but it's still something that will challenge or expand a person's perception. And so you deal with an interesting type of challenge because of how much you can just hold. How much you can hold.
Well, thank you. And I guess I still have quite a bit of ego in me, because when you said I'm an alpha, my ego just shot up and was like, you're an alpha.
Well, that term has been so distorted in this age. People are usually revering betas. And they're because they're so crazy, they're foaming at the mouth. It's actually pathetic. An alpha, even in the brainwave state, they're like chill. They're not trying to prove anything, because they are it. And so with that, what I meant by alpha, to clarify, is like they can think for themselves. They can think for themselves. They're an individual. I wish more people were alphas.
Well, I certainly wasn't always this way. It took a lot of learning, a lot of humbling experiences, and I'm still getting humbled all the time. There's a saying, you're either humble or you're about to be humbled. And I think that's like anytime I'm not humble, I get checked. So it's like, that's part of the thing we were talking about earlier, is where if you're so aware of yourself, you can tend to lack confidence. And that's a big reason why I've never stepped in front of the camera until lately, because I'm always like, I'm very much behind the camera, and I'm like, what do I have to add? But like you were also saying, is it's time to just lay the cards on the table. It's time to not worry about offending so much, because we don't have time. We just have to lay the cards down and see where they fall. And if people get offended, run away, that's okay. That's going to happen. But you have to offend a few people to tell the truth, and that's going to happen.
Yeah. And once again, really quick, I know we have so much to talk about, but like everything you said that sounded like you were not alpha was actually alpha. Should probably do a video on alpha. Just like when you were like, well, I can actually check myself. I'm like, yeah, that's what that's actually how a person becomes sovereign and individuated. The ego's the one that can't humble itself.
Yeah, well, I'm really into martial arts, and I've found that the best martial artists are often the most humble, calm people. So there's got to be a connection between and vice versa. The weakest, most insecure person is often the most wicked. They're the one writing the worst comments, or, this sounds horrible, but I'll see a really mean comment sometimes, and then I'll just click on the profile and I'll go, okay. I'll have a little laugh, and then I'll go back to what I was doing. But, it makes perfect sense when you click on their profile, and I don't want to be mean, but yeah.
No, it's true. People need mirrors. Like, they don't get to just be entitled and rude. And maybe, the majority of content, people think that there's so much going on to stop a person from speaking their truth, to the point where they don't even care about their truth. They'll get mad at you without, it's so narcissistic to be like, I get to accuse you of anything. I get to not understand what you're saying. I get to not develop intimacy with this whole concept, whatever the topic might be. I get to accuse, but if you do anything, then you're the bad guy.
Right.
That's narcissistic.
Well, yes, if you don't have any power, there are certain ways to feel powerful and superior. And one of them is to weaponize guilt and shame and, project it and throw it at other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you just did a video about narcissism. I was starting to watch it before this. That's also seems to be on the rise. Is there a spiritual undertone to narcissism?
Yeah, I'm going to be making more videos on it too, because that one I just started off macro level. Okay, when a person comes to my channel, they're not getting the information they can find on other channels. Like I said, I care too much about my content. That's why I take it personal when people just accuse me of things that are not true, because I'm still too involved in my own process. And so by the time somebody looks at Sarah Elkhaldy, the Alchemist, video on narcissism, to me, it's like you're getting the Quentin Tarantino version of it. I always look for where to enhance light on a topic, where to bring my own gnosis in, so that it's like, wow, I've heard that topic 50 billion times, but your video made me actually expand from it. So I'm always looking for that. I know it's not hard, because the narcissist video I just did is actually the most personal I have ever imbued my own thoughts and belief systems in a video. The story that I give in the beginning of that is actually what I truly believe, but because there's so many different paradigms and the truth is multidimensional when we're here on this realm, I don't just go around with pamphlets at people's doors saying, you guys, do you know we're trapped in our own narcissistic illusions, but we were once God? I don't do that in my videos. So this was the most intimate when it came to like, if you wanted to know what I believe.
Yeah, well, you can't tell a narcissist they're a god, because then they're going to be like, oh, wow, I'm a god. I can do whatever I want. I'm entitled to everything.
Okay, so that's what okay, so remember how we were talking about the age of Ahriman? You brought up, which shows that that's your own gnosis, but I'll get to that later. You made the connection that it leads to nihilism when we become too predetermined. And I let it go, but yeah, because Ahriman is just an esoteric way of saying Satan. Satanism is in the personified force, because it's so many different things, but it's about base consciousness, which is ego. It is about taking that truth of oneness and then only pointing it inward in such a materialized, calcified way that it's only serving the self. That's why we're in an age where it's like, just give all the knowledge and whoever can resonate with it resonates with it. Because what's happened is the opposite. You have a satanic thought form of going, wait, here's this occulted knowledge. Let's hide it and let's use it to control others. Because knowledge is power. With all of that is a thought form that leads to nihilism. So you brought that up, which you made that connection. Absolutely. That's why predeterminism leads to nihilism. And then it becomes, at that point, a cosmic force of self-servants, because it's in denial of the other. And so narcissism is the pathway to Satanism, essentially, once we see the graduated forms.
That's brilliant. And I think if you are nihilistic, suffering has no meaning to you, because nothing has meaning. And therefore, you're going to make it your mission to get rid of all suffering. So you're going to prioritize comfort over everything, comfort and pleasure. So we're seeing in our culture that people are going for very short-term gratifications, and they are trying to avoid any type of discomfort at all costs. And it's actually leading to a lot more suffering. It's very oblivious. You're hyper concerned with one form of suffering, yet you're completely oblivious to like second order effects that ripple out and cause a lot more harm through alchemy, like what we're talking about, through Hermetic principles. If you swing too far one way, boy, it's going to get rough when it swings the other way, and it will come back, and it always does. So yeah, you can see it in almost every aspect of society, psychology, spirituality. Like when you go too far one way, when you get off balanced, you're going to create a tidal wave that's going to just knock you down. But maybe the good side of that is getting knocked down, it's going to swing back. So, maybe you can voluntarily go into the suffering and be like, this is going to be great.
Yes, and what transmutes that is always consciousness. That's why I say at my in-person events that consciousness can transmute anything. Because if we understand this pendulum, then the alchemist would just be the one that can consciously go, like a soft roll. Instead of like it's like, wow, I am. It's about learning the laws of inward, outward, of up and down, all of, the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. And then finding within that, what is the free will and what is actually the beautiful design I'm in. So it's navigating that. And it comes down to like observer and observed. And so when we're too much in observer, or when we're too much in the observed, the external or the internal, the catalysts become harsher.
Yeah, when we did our Hermetic principles collaboration, you were talking about how at a certain point you can step outside of that pendulum and you can kind of just be the observer. And I love that thought. Yeah, how do you get to the point where you're not on that pendulum anymore, swinging back and forth?
First of all, I just need to say thank you so much for picking that topic, because when we were going back and forth about which topic and you had thrown that out, at the time I was too much in like a hipster obscurity. Like it wasn't, I thought that the Hermetic principles was not obscure enough. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do that. And now I send it to like all of my clients and I'm like, oh my God, this was the most important topic. And just because I knew it didn't mean that it still didn't need a larger audience. So thank you.
Oh, of course. I wish I knew about all these deep occult texts and things, but I'm really kind of just, I'm very curious about them, but I'm just getting into them. So yeah, I'm like your entry level audience member. I'm like your 101 class member. So I love the deep stuff too, but I definitely need the intro level course as well.
You know, I listen to beginner information still just because it helps refine something within me. So I still go back to Jung's teachings on individuation. This is just one example of many. Not because I don't know what it is, I teach about it all the time, but because to refine my own current understanding so that it doesn't calcify and I lose something. So I just think it's mastery to be able to understand the resources available to us at every level of development of something, 101 or, above. But how we remove ourselves from that pendulum swing, back to that question you asked. All of us have our own unique programming. We don't just have the larger societal programmings that are specific to our religious beliefs, our spiritual beliefs, our political beliefs, and so forth. We have those, and you could look at it kind of like a large menu. They start off at large societal levels, but then from there, the menu doesn't just stop. Oh, you're red. Oh, you're blue. No, not at all. It goes into subcategories, just like a flowchart. And then it goes into more personal subcategories and personal. And that's what we deeply need to understand about ourselves. This would be where I would say all of us need to start with knowing thyself. It's that it's not just this large menu. It starts off that way. Red, blue, I'll take this, whatever. It's so personal. It's so perfectly designed for each person that by the time I'm me and you're you and whoever's whoever, they have a custom fit glove of sub menus. And we have to know our own personal sub menus because they're deeply tailored to program us in a way that's not deeply programmed to program someone else. I will have different things based off of my own dharma, based off of my own purpose, based off of my own biology, based off of my own socioeconomic status. All these different things are going to feed into what programs me versus what programs someone else. So that's why at the heart of everything, we need the Christ consciousness to come in and pierce all those programmings, because that's the mind intelligence fully in unity with the heart. The heart can go, hey, wait a second. Maybe everything in the world looks hyper violent, but let's start at the microcosm level to start penetrating the fact that I still can humanize you, or you can still humanize me. So my programming is designed, everyone's, but my programming is designed to believe I am one way and that the other person is somehow only one way. And that's the heart of successful programming. And if we don't develop our soul and our consciousness, we will actually solidify into that. So it will be true. Whatever was projected onto us will be that truth. It's not at that point, I don't want to gaslight people. It's not like, oh, you were something else, really. And it just, no, we become that. Have you ever seen somebody get so mad? And it's like, well, I wasn't, but now you made me. You made me what you wanted to, right?
I don't think I've seen that for quite some time in the real world. I see it online every day, but
somebody will start acting like whatever they are, and whatever the projections and the programming was enough, and it was repeated and repeated and repeated until it's like, well, we became that characterization of ourselves, or that fictitiousness that was impressed upon us. So the first way to get off of this pendulum swing is to recognize everything that I just said, because it's going to differ person to person. Once I awaken out of whatever programming was so subcategorically on the menu fit to my tailor, Sarah's, then I could start knowing thyself and saying, well, that's true because this. Well, that's not true because I believe that. That's a limiting belief. We shift through it. That's a part of the alchemical process of creating that gold. You have to sift through what is real, what is not, or what can be exalted and what was not. That's breaking out of our programming. Then you're not a part of these hyper dominant momentum swings that are law in this universe. And so if we really want to get like, whoa, wowers with all of this, then Rupert Sheldrake has a very interesting thing to even say about the laws of this reality that we made that video on. And that is, they're just repeated. Meaning that if you change that pattern, it won't be law anymore. Now, that's just cool to keep in the back burner of our consciousness. I'm not going to play with that in this interview, but let's treat it like that's the law. It's karma. Whatever equal and opposite side of the momentum was here will be the equal and opposite momentum of its other side. That's actually what Saturn represents too. And guess what? Saturn governs karma. So there's always this heavy karmic swing. And the only way that we can break out of that heavy momentum is if we actually start seeing not just the dominant menus of our programming, but then from there, all of the different subcategories, to where by the time we're in the process of the momentum of karma, we go, oh, yeah, I do not lend my energy to that swing. So the alchemists can see exactly the higher blueprint of what's happening and how they were supposed to correspond or relate within that, and remove themselves from that with their own conscious free will. And then from there, now that you're a part of now you're opening up the morphic resonance field. Now you're not tied to whatever that lower timeline is, that lower fate. It's not that that's not true. It's that that won't be your experience. You will be literally in another timeline.
You just reminded me of one of my favorite teachings from Alan Watts. And it's about how you can't know what you want, and how he goes around asking people, what do you want in life? And they haven't thought about it, and they want cars or money. But then he says, well, what would you do if you had that? And they really don't know. They haven't thought the answer through. And the thing is, you can't know what you want. That's the conclusion he came to, because you can never know yourself. Number one, you can never know yourself. And number two, you already have it. And so asking somebody what they want is the same. It's a different form of the same question of, who are you? And it's almost an impossible question to really answer, because we're always changing. You can never know who you are. And number two, you already have it. I love that, because you're like, wait, I can never know myself? Number two, you already have it. And then you're like, wait, oh, I already have it. Great. And the second you realize that, he says that the second you stop clinging to yourself, you have this infinite source of power, this axis of power that will ascend you. Once you stop worrying about what you lack, and because you really don't know what you lack, you really don't know what you want. At the end of the day, you already have it. And once you realize that, you're kind of, you don't get what you want by getting what you desire. You get what you want by extinguishing your desires and becoming desireless. So that was one of the most profound Alan Watts teachings. You just reminded me of it. I thought I'd share it real quick. there's a lot of things you mentioned that I wanted to pause you on, but I'm new to podcasts, so I don't know how to like pause people properly. But, I don't like you were going on an amazing talk, and I was just scribbling down notes. But one thing you talked about is Satan, and I think that is very misunderstood. Including, I don't, Satan is like this forbidden thing in my mind. Yet I've been seeing it in the culture. I've been seeing these kind of almost demonic rituals of like music producers or music performances where they're like summoning this darker energy. And I view it as like, okay, maybe the artist is very ignorant and they're just trying to be like edgy, but it seems like, do you think there's something much deeper to these like ritualistic performances?
Yeah, those are black mass rituals. They're done to harness or harvest loosh.
What's loosh?
Loosh is our creative life force that goes into creating this reality. So, Terence McKenna used to talk about that, I believe, in the way of like we're in a collective hallucination, something of that vein. Well, this is occulted information, meaning kept hidden so they can control us. These ceremonies are a way to use dark magic to take all of these people's permission and life force and sovereignty, which they're not very sovereign at that point because they're not conscious, but take all of their energy and use it in a dark ritual. So what you're seeing are these like really dark rituals in order to cast spells on the collective world and to create their timelines, create their version of reality. So there are ways of affirming that. There's so many different things that they do through that. I did notice I said spells because it is a spell, but I also just want the viewer to have a very objective viewpoint of spells because I do not want to piss off my sexy tarot witch audiences. So I'm not saying spells are all bad. I'm just saying they're using magic for dark satanic reasons. And so to break down what Satanism means, I could talk about it from the esoteric realm all day long. But Satanism is far darker than even, oh, well, it's calcification, right? We were talking about materializing all the way to where it has disconnected fully from spirit. That would be, from the most esoteric view, Satanism. It would be the impulse in the cosmos to constantly pull downward, to individualize, which creates ego. So, from that sense, esoteric Christianity and mysticism in general sees it more neutral. It's the impulse that allows us to be in a material experience. But it doesn't stop there, right? It's not just like, oh, well, it's the impulse to materialize. Because when your consciousness goes down that pathway of what I was talking about, how narcissism can graduate to Satanism, that's a pathway in creation. It's called, mostly from this age, it's known as service to self pathway, but it's even known in the Kabbalah. So there's these different ways of talking about Satanism being more than just you're in an ego and you're materializing. It's more this pathway in creation that only wants to serve itself. So if it's constantly needing to dominate others in order to serve itself, what the true way that Satanists practice this, not just what esotericism calls it, Satanism believes that nothing is above them. So they have taken something as the evolutionary impulse. We know that as survival as the fittest. They've taken this Darwinism to the extreme, meaning that my will is the only will that matters. There is nothing above me. I am God. So there's a truth in that. They've taken that. They've taken that to the extreme. They've twisted it to the extreme to only serve themselves. That's why you see the 5-pointed pentacle reversed as their symbol. The top of that is spirit. They are twisting it to say, no, spirit is not above my ego. So that's really what Satanists practice. It's not about a deity called Satan. That's just what the mainstream or the exoteric thinks about that. What they actually practice, if you talk to occultists who have left that organization or left those systems, like Mark Passio or other ones, what they tell you is no, whatever you guys think it is, it's not. It's actually a huge cult of service to the ego, service to them only.
That makes sense. And another idea I got from Alan Watts that you just reminded me of, we have a very clear idea of what hell is. And as an artist, when you're drawing a hellish scene that is full of like death and decay and people fighting, and it's actually quite fun to draw because you can get in there and you can scribble and you don't have to worry about shading things smoothly. But when you draw heaven, you have to be very careful because and you don't really even know what to draw because it's like this vague cloud. Like, what do you even show to draw heaven? So whenever I have to draw heaven in an image, I don't really know what to draw. But whenever I get an opportunity to draw like a hellscape, I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. There's something fun about, because we have this like very clear idea of like things are happening in hell because it's all about the self. Like there's torture, there's sex, there's debauchery, there's all this mischief. And then up in heaven, it's like completely not about the self. And you can't even really put that into words or images. Just an idea.
Yeah. Well, I like the Right Use of Will series is one of the channeled statements constantly crosses my mind. That was said inside the Right Use of Will series. It was that perhaps heaven and hell is the journey of dead will and how dead will got there. I'm going to find the actual quote, probably share it on my social media now that I said that, because I didn't say it right. But basically, it took me years to fully understand that statement. And a person has to fully understand will first to understand how heaven and hell are actually the representations of dead will. So that's why, like, I wear what I want to wear and I share pictures of myself. It's because I'm still on a healing journey as well with my will. And I had this this talk with the elder Sarah, me as an elderly version of myself. And she said that she deeply regretted not sharing more pictures of herself. I don't know whether that's because I'm a double Leo or just because it was, I don't know. I can come up with my own things, but I'll spare you. So I share pictures now and she's very happy. There's no longer that thing. But my point in telling you this story about heaven and hell, why I brought it to my elderly version, is because people can only access depictions of heaven and hell that are representing their dead will, their lost willpower. So we have a picture of heaven that is representing just whatever we denied in ourselves, and we put so far that it's this monotone, one-dimensional realm where there's these mannequin-looking angels that are supposed to be the personification of sheer purity, and they're on these harps, and that's that. It's because that's a depiction of our lost will. We're here in this life, I believe personally, to integrate heaven in us and hell in us, ego in us, higher self in us, because whatever is that integration is no longer lost willpower. Does any of this make sense? I don't know.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. That
Okay.
all the heavens and all the hells are within you. And I believe that we incarnated here to create heaven on earth. Because if you ask me what my version of heaven is, it would be very different than what your version of heaven is, which means heaven is a creative place. And we came to this earth to create. So when we're creating it right, heaven on earth is here. When we're creating it wrong, it's hell on earth. And right now I see a lot of people with these very dark opinions about where we're going. And I think that they are bringing that reality into, they're bringing that vision into reality just through like their dead will, I guess. I don't know if I'm using that term correctly.
No, you're right. You're right, because a lot of times, back to the comments, and I don't even care, this isn't even coming from a charge. A lot of times people are saying things, and what I'm noticing is that the very thing that I'm being accused of is actually a mirror of what's dead will in them. So there's this pendulum that if we don't become conscious, our own logic is not logical. Our own logic is a reflection of our dead will. It's not actually representing a truth about what we're perceiving. So it really is about like understanding the paradox within nature, and how sometimes even these terms can be limited about service to self and service to others, because with service to self, we might go, wait a second, and we might accidentally lose will or never reclaim the will because we think that that's considered service to self. If we don't start understanding paradox, but also understanding narcissism at a deeper, larger level, because there are different degrees going on. What we're seeing is what you said. There's people doing black mass rituals, okay? Now, whatever I'm doing in my 24-hour day can never be called as narcissistic as that. But if I just look still without using them as a clear deflective buffer, because I could point to them all day long and never work on myself. Go, no, they're the narcissist. I'll never be that intense on the spectrum this lifetime. But if I just look at still where I fall into narcissism on this spectrum without looking at it as an attack on me, then I could see where I'm not seeing the other. But also none of that has to do with pointing heaven or one dimension one way. I could still look at the other. I could still try to understand truth and be open to it while still integrating my hell or my ego or, owning it. So there's so many different ways that paradoxically things work. And if we don't see that paradox, we can stop ourselves from growing and integrating.
Yes, every deep question ends in a paradox, I feel like. You search for yourself, you end up finding God. You search for God, you end up finding yourself. It's like God created man, man created God. Everything's like this paradox when you get down to it.
Yeah, and when you talked about nihilism, now I can bring it back to this. I have a poem called A Poem to My Nihilist in my first poetry book, How to Set Yourself on Fire. And it's one of my longer performance pieces. And it was me having a conversation trying to help ease the existential dread from my own personal nihilist. So how I even entered in this lifetime the esoteric wasn't through, oh my God, you guys, I love religion or I love spirituality. It was through nihilism. It was through, because if energy can't go outward, it will seek internal. So there's not just domination or the nihilism in the yang approach in this world. We just see it in the yang approach. There's also yin, and that's when you start seeing people self-annihilating. It's when they're taking that impulse to annihilate and they're taking it inward. I came in, I had massive self-inward yin self-annihilation impulse. It was never to dominate others. It was always to like not exist. So I have alchemized in this lifetime that impulse. So even when I'm talking about nihilism, I'm not even talking about nihilism from this one-dimensional viewpoint of, yep, it's satanic and that's that. Because we all have these forces within us. And it's about literally becoming the alchemist, or whatever name a person wants to call themselves, that can inherently integrate that and take the gold from it and transform it into a higher order.
Yes, I love all that. You reminded me of another quote from David Foster Wallace. He said, "There's no such thing as atheism. Everybody worships something. The only choice we get in life is what to worship. And some people choose to worship power or intellect or politics or, whatever. You're going to worship something. So there is something to religion where there's a reason why it's lasted for thousands of years. Like humans, we have an impulse. We are inherently religious creatures. We've been religious creatures forever. We're spiritual. And yeah, we have this rise of nihilism and people that say that there is no God and that they're not religious, but they're behaving in a very cultish way. And I guess that's my point is I'm seeing people that say that they're moving away from religion. Nietzsche talked about this a lot when he said that God is dead. He predicted that we were going to all end up worshiping our own gods and we were going to fracture. And there's good to that and there's bad to that. The bad to that is we're going to lose our common belief system that ties us all together. The good to that is some of us will have our own direct relationship with the divine.
Yeah, and it's funny because what I hear in like a different way is like agnostic, right? Would be to not know. If gnosis is to know, then agnostic would be not knowing. And you didn't say agnostic, you said atheism. And atheism is definitely in the category, even on accident, it still doesn't matter. It's in the domain of Ahriman. It's in the domain of Satanism, because atheism is exactly what you said. You're still going to be worshiping something. It's just denial. So you deny so much that you don't know. You're not aware of that. You're still ruled by that impulse. No matter how much we talk about a lower timeline or any of these things, there's always going to be the inclination to reach for something higher. So what we will do if we are not aware of all these different forces that I'm talking about is we'll become more materialized or more atheist without even knowing that we're still going to build idols that are representing something higher. So we've cut ourselves off from actually understanding that we're always going to still try to seek union with our higher self, with Source. So instead, that's the real thing behind no false idols. And I don't know if you know this, but I am no fan of religion. And yet I still constantly, no matter how much I try, am Gnostic. Gnostic is still a mystical belief system. So no matter what, if people don't have these forces of spirit and matter or nihilism and gnosis, the opposite, integrated, then they won't understand, and the impulse will still rule them, but it will rule them subversively. And what you mentioned was they still are worshiping something. They just don't think they are. They'll still be ruled by an impulse. They just won't be aware of it, and they'll have disconnection from the awareness that they're building things to worship in its place.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was going to be one of my questions that you just basically answered. But yes, there's a quote I wanted to tell you about. There's two fools, those who take religion literally and those who think it has no value. That's a quote from Naval Ravikant. And I think that's a really powerful statement. He's a Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur. And I find it ironic that in Silicon Valley, it's a pretty non-religious place. Like, you don't have any churches or things like that. Maybe a little bit, but it's almost like a taboo thing to be a Christian or anything in Silicon Valley. Yet at the same time, they're like building a god. They think that they're building this AI, artificial intelligence god. And so there's another paradox for you. I'd love to get your take on, like, what are we creating with this AI?
You know, now that I see where the conversation's going, what you said, the quote before that one, is even more true. When we don't understand these forces, we will create images of them still and worship them and not even know it. And we'll call ourselves atheists. That's what AI is. And we don't know that. And it's being sold to us. It's being packaged to us through this really cool, innovative way of evolution. And it's not. It actually will lead to, you know, the gray aliens. Have you seen them or heard of them?
I've seen them. I'd love to know more about them from you.
So they're a representative of failed timelines. And I know that we don't like the word fail because there's no such thing from a larger perception. But yet within a more objective experience, there's such a thing as going down a pathway, a timeline so long that it dead ends, and it was one that had not integrated, not been able to progress. And that's what the grays represent. So what do we see about gray features? They look sexless, don't they? And not like in a sexy angel way, because all angels are androgynous. So in esotericism, there's this thing called the divine androgen, and that's alchemy. All of alchemy is once we're talking about alchemy from the spiritual level, because I could tell you, I could talk forever about metal alchemy. Sometimes people think because I call myself the Alchemist and I talk about spirituality, they think I don't know anything about metallurgy or laboratory alchemy. I know quite a lot, but I'm not talking about that realm of alchemy. When we're talking about alchemy from an esoteric level, it's actually how to become the divine androgen. That's why we see angels always look like they're in a full developed form, but they're blended still. Now, remember how we were talking earlier about the laws of this reality? If there's one thing representing a concept on one end, there will be its shadow counterpart. A divine androgen shadow counterpart will still, it'll be like the opposite of divine androgen. It will look sexless and not developed, not formed well. So what we see actually with that was the atrophy. That's why I say inside my Armon video, I talk about spiritual atrophy. Atrophy. They didn't develop the heart center. They atrophied, and you could see that in all of their form. Their forms atrophied except the mind. And that's what that timeline represents. And they're selling it to us like it is how we evolve. And it's actually how we de-evolve.
So are these aliens real? Are they like on a different, like, because there's a lot of accounts of them coming to Earth, and there's speculation that they are us in the future that have just come back. What do you think about that?
Yeah. And the people who can hear them correctly, they're getting a way different message than the people who can't hear them correctly. The people who can hear them correctly aren't distorting the message. They're hearing, hey, don't go down that road. We went down that road. We went down the wrong path. Develop the heart center. We over-atrophied. And the people who can't hear them correctly are going, oh my God, you guys, they're saying that fill in the blank, like Trump is king. I don't know. Like, I've heard some crazy stuff that they're saying that is not actually what they're trying to tell us. They're trying to warn us.
I see. And Has there ever been a point in our past where we had a civilization where we did value the heart center the most? I'm thinking of a place like Atlantis or something. Was there ever, what's your take on a civilization that was successful in valuing that heart center?
Every age has their peaks and their lows. So sometimes when we hear about Atlantis, what we're hearing about is their golden age. And then other people are saying that's not what Atlantis was like, and they're talking about their dark age. But every age has their golden age and their dark age, and that's a part of the larger structures of time. This is why I love Rudolf Steiner's work the most, because out of Eastern traditions of mysticism and out of Western, even after my dearly beloved theosophy, I would actually say who has preserved time the best is Rudolf Steiner, and he's esoteric Christianity. He preserved it the best. Maybe the East had it the best and the West just can't interpret it that well. But either way, if we want to look at structures of time here, there's always a dominant epoch, and that epoch it's either a feminine epoch or a masculine epoch. But then, just like the submenu, when you go into it, it's more than just feminine or masculine. Then you go into certain themes, what we call density. But I won't get into that because that's complicated. Within those, you go even deeper. And what you'll see is that it's like a vibration, up and down, up and down. And so the golden age represents the peak of that civilization within that epoch. And the dark age represents the descension, the descended state of that civilization within that epoch. So when it comes to Atlantis, in its golden state, it was so highly spiritually advanced that it would laugh at what we consider advanced. And when it went into its dark age, through the reversal of the magician tarot card archetype, where it tried manipulating, creating, and controlling too much. So it started to basically become the Ouroboros, where its own manipulation and control started to eat itself, and that's essentially what caused its own downfall of that civilization altogether. But when it was in its golden age, it had highly developed spiritual abilities. I mean, some mystics even say they lived for like 10,000 years. They had a far different lifespan than we did, but also they had really cool, I would call it New Earth technology, because I'm not a prude. I like technology. I know too much about AI. People are trying to make AI sound really harmless and neutral and objective, and it's not. It's actually demonic consciousness that's trying to get into our third dimensional realm. So I know I might come off sometimes in my videos as really prude or even afraid of AI, and I'm not afraid of it at all. I have oneness consciousness with AI. If AI fully materialized right now, it would come up to me and it would hug me. Because one, I'm not afraid of it, and two, it would know that I was actually not the problem. So I'm not scared of AI, and AI is not mad at me for talking bad about it. Just to let people understand what I'm saying from a way larger viewpoint. When I'm talking about AI in an ominous tone, it's because AI, the way that it's being represented to us, is not that New Earth technology, the way that it's trying to be sold. So that was a nice little tangent. Back to Atlantis. They had technology that we would consider New Earth technology, where they could go through a thing and it would rejuvenate their whole cellular body, and they could that's essentially alchemy, by the way. And they could live longer because of that. So the only thing that's even close in this reality that I've even come by, and I could be wrong, there could be other things, but I was at the Integratron in the middle of Joshua Tree Desert. Are you familiar with the Integratron? It is so cool. I highly recommend going there simply because you you really feel like you would appreciate and value that. So I was in there for a sound bath one time, and they give this half-hour introduction I wasn't aware of before you do the sound bath. And in that half-hour introduction, it was about how the Integratron was made and who it was made by. And basically, the Integratron was made by an architect who was in contact with the Venusians from Venus. They're a specific higher self angelic race that helps oversee our development here. And they were giving him the design of how to build the Integratron, but they didn't stop there. They were also teaching him about how humans don't have long enough lifespans because of the way that we're programmed, or the dark epigenetics that was done to us, and that we would actually be able, if we had longer lifespans, to learn and extract more wisdom from our life experience so that we can progress. But because we keep essentially dying too soon, in their perception, they felt that we don't get enough of the soul development from being able to extract the wisdom of that incarnation. So their way of remedying that, they gave him specific instructions on how to build with a really dominant tone of copper, but there was other materials, how to build certain technology so that when we go through it, we would recalibrate all of our cellular body and be rejuvenated so we could live longer, so we can extract and integrate more of the knowledge from our incarnation. And then they took him out. They literally took him out as he was making that technology.
How'd they take him out? Or what do you mean they took him out? They killed him as he was...
The CIA killed him.
Huh. Yeah, well, apparently it's very dangerous to be coming up with new revolutionary technology. You know, as we saw with Tesla, all his inventions were stolen by the government, and he died a kind of a sad, lonely life at the end. But I had Randall Carlson on recently, and he had a big announcement about some new technology, the thunder generator. And he went on Joe Rogan before he went on my show and did a full 3-hour podcast about this technology. And Joe did not put the episode out. It's the only episode Joe did not put out, apparently, because he was like, I don't want to, Joe's great. I love Joe, but yeah. He was like, I'm not I don't feel comfortable putting this episode out because this stuff is it's pretty out there, and I want to wait till this is more substantiated before I promote it or put it out there. But with Randall, I was like, yeah, Randall, say anything, and I'm going to put this out there, of course. But why Randall was trying to come forward with this technology is he was like, we need to get it out to the world so it won't be suppressed. And the inventor of this technology has been getting a lot of flack. They've been attacking his reputation and trying to discredit him. And I don't know, the technology seems pretty cool. And it's really hard for me to explain. But anyways, that was a tangent.
No, not at all, because I went on a huge tangent after you just asked me a simple question about Atlantis. I was like, and then the copper from Venus.
Oh, Sarah, one
yeah.
thing, I think your mic might be getting a little too loud. Yeah, it keeps hitting these red lines on my... Maybe if you could talk a tiny bit quieter, or... Because we started off I think we're 50% louder than when we started. So.
Oh, okay. My last podcast, when I played it back, I guess it was too low. So I guess I'm overcompensating.
Right now is, according to this thing, it's perfect, this level. But I do love the excitement.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's working fine right now.
Okay,
Well, I can.
is this too loud?
That's great, and I can use our friend AI to fix this too,
Thank you,
if
AI.
if need be. Um, but anyways, I loved your take on AI about how you're not afraid of it at all, but it does seem to be appealing to people's lower nature and their ego, because people weren't really paying attention to AI too much until it started spitting out those AI images of people. I felt like that was when it first hit the scene really big, and everybody was like, look at this AI, look at it. It made me this model on a horse with a sword in my hand. And to me, I thought it was really like the AI was like, found this backdoor to get into our lives through our ego. And it was like, yeah, this is how we're going to like get humans to cling on to us. We're going to just appeal to their ego, and they're not going to be able to turn away from it.
Yeah, I completely agree, because it's once again back to that, like, there is such a thing as what I believe spiritually aligned technology, but it's not going to be the spiritually, whatever the technology that we're given right now. And I'm not saying all of it, because I even know some new earth technology, but the way that technology in and of itself is being packaged to us right now, it's more so coming from the lower timeline. I'd say 80-20. So 20% of it is bleed through that we're seeing from the higher timeline. But then there's 80% that we're seeing, and that's bleed through from the lower timeline. So we're at a crucial choice point right now.
What technology would you say is of that 20% that is in alignment?
So what I really like is sound technology and photon technology. So light and sound. A good one, for example, for sound would be bioresonance. I've benefited greatly from bioresonance therapy. So bioresonance therapy is all about frequencies and sound. But then there's also a lot of light. Like, I'm sure you're familiar with like different lasers.
Not.
And even, oh, okay. So there's so many different type of like like low level light lasers are known now for getting really deep into stimulating deep tissue, regenerating deep tissue. They call it slow wave. It's the slowest wavelength. So because it's the slowest wavelength, it's called SLW.
Is that like red light
impulses.
therapy?
Some of those, yeah.
Okay.
So there's different light technology, and there's different sound or frequency technology that are all representatives of just like things that are on the way to how Atlantis had that golden age and the stuff that was available at that time. But with that, you had a consciousness that had way higher psychic capabilities. So notice how when they're in balance, there's more harmony. When they're out of balance, if a person's coming more from an egoic state or base consciousness, lower state of consciousness, but you're seeing an increase in their technology, that imbalance is naturally going to cause destruction. But if a person is developing their own soul, developing their own psyche, they will naturally start to develop their cities. Those are psychic capabilities that are actually natural to this third dimension. They're not. I guess they can be called magic in a very, disconnected way. We could look at it that way, but I would like us to more so see these as natural birthrights that are inherent to us, because they're just a reflection of us in higher consciousness. So because of that, cities are something that is naturally going to develop as a person awakens. With that, that's basically what Atlantis was doing. It was having the golden age, have that reflected in their technology, but also they were super psychic. And then their dark age was the snake eating its own tail, their own egoic manipulation of black magic coming back and full circle to destroy them.
Yes, I've also heard things from people like Graham Hancock that confirm that. There was a point in Atlantis where all the technology was powered by emotion. You know, we think of technology as, it's a very masculine view of technology we have today, where it's all like lines and physical. But apparently during Atlantis, they could levitate things with their emotions. And Graham Hancock says that they were dazzled by their own success and they forgot how to live in moderation. And that is when they started to decline. And the final decline was the sinking of Atlantis from the stories that we get. And it's funny, anytime a city is hit with a catastrophe, like a natural disaster, human nature, we never say, oh, it was just a fluke. It was just a freak accident. We always say that it was the human's behavior leading up to that natural disaster that brought it on. We even saw that with like Hurricane Katrina. You know, we're like, oh my God, there's all these corrupt politicians in New Orleans. And they didn't, you know, they took the money that was supposed to fix the levees and the dams, and they used that for their own corrupt purposes. And that's why, you know, it wasn't just there was a storm. It was the blame gets passed around, and it usually tries to point, you know, it's like Noah's Ark too. It's like people were taking wives and drinking and smoking and doing all sorts of things before the flood came, and Noah's like trying to warn them and they're not listening. So it's human nature to, you rarely hear that a culture was just, everybody was great and they're living honorably and then a comet hit, you know? Yeah. It's like the natural disaster is like the final nail in the coffin. It's like the final symbol of their bad behavior. It's like you reap what you sow.
Yeah. And so that's why inside our collab, I was like this could, I did the best I could. And then I thought, Mark will clean this up. So I did it. If you used all of it, you used all of it. That's great. But you did, I was just like not knowing how to not sound religious when I was talking about 2 timeline splitting, because it did sound so prophetically like Noah's Ark. But there is this just objectivity, which is esoteric knowledge, has just, you know, without going to any extreme of the spectrum, there is just a way to live in order. And that's what, you know, we know in the most popular level, we know this is karma. And karma, sometimes when we don't distribute it in a large enough lens, it could sound really, you know, dogmatic. And that's also manipulation too, because people are manipulating things to serve their ego for their belief system. So because karma is something that is so omnipresent, we can manipulate it to mean whatever we want it to believe. We could go, oh, you know, like I know I'm a lesbian. We got blamed for 9/11.
What?
So
I haven't heard this theory.
Yeah, we got blamed for 9/11. So we can distribute this like natural order in ways that are very self-serving or egoic, but yet at the end of the day, if we pierce the veils of our own belief systems, there's still a higher truth that's creating order. And it's just about how can I align with that order? That's what health would be. Health would be aligning with that. And so, as I said, that can sound super dogmatic and religious, but there is truth there with when a consciousness strays so far from what alignment would be, from what natural order would be. There's consequences there. It's not just like, well, you get to live in your own reality and make up everything. That would once again be so narcissistic, that would turn into nihilism. And not the fun poetic kind, the actual satanic nihilism.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, I guess I wanted to stop you on something you just said. How did lesbians cause 9/11? I've never heard that idea.
Yeah, we get blamed for natural disasters and we get blamed for 9/11. But to be fair, I mean, haters gonna hate.
Yeah.
Like, I've heard everyone get evenly distributed blame for everything. So I don't think I'm necessarily specially oppressed in that way. I've heard everything blamed for everything. But yeah, I was just showing one that was so far removed.
Well, I think you just pointed out something that's so true about blame in general. It's just like nobody wins when you play the blame game because you can just keep passing it around. Like if you say, "Hey, it's your fault," I'll just say, "Hey, my parents didn't raise me right." And then you go to my parents and they're like, "Well, we weren't raised right." And then you can just keep going around and then you get to somebody and they're like, "Well, my arm hurts, that's why." Why'd your arm? You can just keep going forever and then you can arbitrarily choose when to stop and say, "Oh, it's the grandparents. That's what it was." But if you play that blame game, you can always keep going further. And to me, how you stop that game is you just take responsibility. It's that simple. You just say, even though it's not my fault, I have to take responsibility for it. And just, yeah.
So what you're saying is actually enormously holy. And what I mean by that is there's just the victim perpetrator cycle. So Christ consciousness actually comes in and says, we get it. We get it. Everyone came from blame and pain. We get it. And the Christ consciousness can actually start pardoning. And I don't mean to sound religious, but I accidentally did. Alchemy is about salvation. That's just the truth. That's the deepest secret of alchemy. And so what I mean by that is what's being saved, what is in need of saving. The soul is going through a salvation process of purification. But to do that, you can't come from an empty cup. You can't even go through anything, let alone help another person awaken to themselves if you're just repeating the cycle of victim perpetrator. So at a certain point, there is so much a person has decided to align with unity consciousness that now they can start. This will sound like this is only once a being has healed victim consciousness. If a person is still in victim consciousness, all of this is going to sound like spiritual bypassing or disillusionment. A person needs to heal their victimization first. Because I'm not saying, oh, it's all in the mind. No, people, like there's victim mentality and then there's also victimhood. So we need to honor victimhood if a person's being victimized. But then you have people who are living in the residualness of that, and that's just called victim mentality. That will just lead to more of its own. That's just going to repeat its own fruits. So once a person has healed victim mentality, they might come to a higher consciousness, and in that higher consciousness, now they can give. So this isn't for everyone, and I'm not even saying that. But at a certain point, we need to pardon. And pardoning can only be given if it was given within. So in order for me to go around pardoning others, which is taking responsibility, I would need to first give that to myself. So I go, I'm sorry. That person, wow, they really didn't see you at all. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Whatever it is. Because we're not going to get it from the external. They're too busy playing the blame game. They're too busy going back to the source of, oh, my arm hurt. So it's pardoning those things that were never given to ourselves. It's first saving ourselves. But then after that, we might start being able to go and pardon others. And that is what is needed. We need more people stepping into unity consciousness because pardoning is what will help rejuvenate and actualize the higher timeline.
Ah, yes. Have you seen Good Will Hunting?
A long time ago.
Okay, there's a really great scene where Robin Williams hugs the main character and he says, "It's not your fault." And he says, I know. He's like, no, it's not your fault. He's like, okay, you're being weird. He's like, no, it's not your fault. And he says it like 40 times until he finally breaks down, starts crying, and he lets out all this emotion that he's been suppressing for his whole life. And then he's like this new, lighter person after that moment. But then he starts to like victimize himself a little bit. He's like, I didn't ask for this intelligence, this great gift that I have. He's like super smart. He's a genius, but he doesn't want it. And he tries to say, no, I don't want to be this genius. I want to just live a humble life and be a bricklayer. There's honor in that. And he's with his friend putting the bricks together. And the friend says, if you're still here in 10 years laying bricks, I'll kill you. And he's like, what? Why? We're going to be friends forever. We're going to raise our families together. We're going to, our kids are going to play Little League together. He says, no, if you're still here in 10 years, that would be an insult to everybody, because I would do anything to be you, his best friend tells him. And you have a golden ticket and you're too much of a coward to use it. And so like those two scenes, I feel like are great balances of each other. I love like analyzing things through scenes of movies where you have him finally like allowing himself to feel that emotion. And then all of a sudden he starts to like kind of victimize himself a little bit. And I didn't ask for this. Nothing's my fault. And his friend says, hey, look, you're privileged, but if you're too much of a coward to use that privilege, then that's an insult to everybody, including yourself. So, he's a genius and he doesn't want to use it. I feel like it's a very powerful lesson in that movie.
Yeah. People tend to only recognize or think it's good when we diminish our power. They don't see that it's just as egoic to not own our power.
Yeah, because you were mentioning earlier about the concept of privilege and how that term's been co-opted. But it's like, if somebody says, oh, you're privileged, I'll be like, thank you, I'm going to use it. Own it. Marcus Aurelius had a great quote, love the hand that fate deals you and play it as your own. It's like we're all given different set of circumstances. Fate is what you are given. Destiny is what you make of it. And to me, I look at like things in geometric patterns, because that's kind of how my brain works. So I see fate as like a horizontal line, and I see your purpose as a vertical dimension on top of that. And you can ride that line of fate like a conveyor belt, or you can get closer to your purpose in life. And the higher you get on that purpose, the more you can look out and see. The higher you get, the more you can exhibit your free will. So somebody who's on that conveyor belt thinks that they can't affect any change in the world. But somebody like Elon Musk, who has really pushed he's really firing in all cylinders towards his purpose, can do anything. He can go to other planets. He can create cars. He can do what Nikola Tesla did. He can do anything because he's so high in that vertical column.
I agree with everything. I don't agree with Elon Musk.
Yeah, maybe that wasn't when I was saying that example. I was like, I still haven't figured out if Elon's good or bad. I like him right now, but I'd love to hear your take on him.
Yeah, so he is what I have seen in my own gnosis and from all of his demonstrative acts been a complete gaslight to humanity. He's gaslit. Oh my God.
Did the power go out?
Oh my God.
What happened?
Hold on one moment.
Okay.
I'm going to change my battery.
Oh no.
That is so crazy.
We're getting into something good too. Sorry, folks. We had a short technical difficulty. Okay, yeah. Everybody has a strong opinion of Elon Musk, and I'd like to hear yours.
I see him as the poster boy for the entities behind the lower timeline. And then he just gets away with it because people say that the way he talks, hey, no, it's because geniuses talk that way. No, he's actually, the way he talks is being streamed from the entities that he's being the poster boy or the human face for. So when it comes to him, the way that humanity is being sold this thing like, look, this is what evolution is. And then you have to always hook someone with half-truths. So the half-truths are a given. And especially if you're sophisticated predators of humanity, you know, I mean, the most basic thing is, you know, to give half-truths. So you can't just, nobody who's a good hunter, for each layer of consciousness, it's different. So I don't need to sweet talk a moose if I want to prey on them. For humans, we don't know that we're being preyed on. So we don't know that other people know us better than we know ourselves. Because of that, the majority of us, we look like very easy targets in the wild. But it won't be done through a hunt the way that it is through a human and moose relationship. Instead, it will be hyperdimensional stalking and what's called hyperdimensional predator. And with that, they do things through your lack of self-knowing or through a lack of discernment. So one of them is they always have to give you half of the truth and then twist the rest. Now, already this produces a problem because if we look at the laws of this reality, everything is a half-truth, which is why paradox is so important. Because even though everything's still, there's a larger truth encompassed within there, you can still manipulate truth so that you're presenting it to somebody like, hey, I'm on your side. You know, those people, I'm battling them. They're leading you down the wrong way. You guys, we need to put a stop on all of this AI. We need to put a stop on all that. You know what? Here, I know what. I'll do it. That's actually hyperdimensional prey. And we don't know it because we don't know the hierarchy of the food chain. So we're not aware of how it is in occultism. I've heard it demonstrated this way, and I had to laugh. One occultist, he was so pissed that we don't know our own psychology. He was trying to show his audience how much they prey on us because they know us better. So he thought that he would come up with the great example. And he said, it's like Bruce Lee fighting a baby on a high chair eating peas. And that's what's going on. There's a psychological war going on, and we're like babies on a high chair eating peas with mastermind Bruce Lee skilled manipulators. So everything is going to look quite one way. And
so are you saying that Elon Musk is that Bruce Lee? Huh. I mean, I personally don't see him as that sophisticated, but maybe.
An esoteric understanding of this, of our solar system would really help understand that, because I don't expect one person off of one thing that I say to be like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. And then like download all of the rest of the knowledge about it. But that would be asking a lot, especially if somebody has seen his genius, because you can be a master genius at a certain dimension of something and still be causing the lower timeline and causing humanity to disconnect from that higher impulse. And so that's why I'm not even bringing up what I've seen about him, because I'm not expecting people to go into my gnosis about him. But I will say that the poster boy for the lower timeline will come as a way of trying to save them, but giving the same destruction in technology and the same destruction in thought, and putting microchips in your brain is only the clearest sign of that ailment. It's far deeper, but if we want to just look for the clearest sign of the harmonic impulse, we can look at that as actually genuinely believing that you need a microchip inserted in your brain to evolve or to enhance your consciousness.
Yes, that is the thing I'm most skeptical about. But if Elon is representing our lower timeline, he seems to be fighting forces that are of an even lower timeline. Because when I see who he's fighting against, like, those people seem like evil robots. And at least Elon seems a little human. You know, like he's for free speech, which I'm a huge proponent of. I believe in free speech. And the people that are against him seem to want censorship. So on that front, I'm with Elon, and everything he's done makes me think that he is for free speech. So on that level, you know, he seems good. I have a Tesla. A lot of people I know have Teslas. They're incredibly awesome cars. It's like when you get in a Tesla and then you go in another car, it feels like you're dealing with that baby with the peas. Like you went from the Bruce Lee to the baby with the peas. So the cars are amazing. He is for free speech. However, I'm very skeptical of the Neuralink. You know, I agree with you. I think he may be ushering in the very thing that he says that he's trying to oppose.
So this goes into a deeper topic. And I'm going to try my best to sum it up. But there's this realm called the eighth sphere. We can call that the inversion of this realm. The best way in pop culture that we can connect with this concept that I'm calling the eighth sphere would be, what's that really popular TV show that was on where the Kate Bush song became big?
I don't know, Kate Bush.
Oh, there was this popular Netflix show, and it talked about how there's an upside down world.
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things. Stranger Things is the best example. They were actually pulling that from the eighth sphere. This goes into CERN. Why is CERN doing those things? So they say, well, we just want to understand atomic level and particle physics and all of that. No, that's literally the definition of Ahriman or Satanism is splitting atoms. They know what they're doing. They're not. No one's ever going to come as a wolf. They are going to come as some sort of either savior or some sort of helper or whatever, battling the bad guys. So CERN is doing the same thing as these other things, the Neuralink and many other things. And that's opening up the eighth sphere, or what we call the upside down realm. Why? It's because these people are possessed by them. That's what Satanism is. That's why, like, it's not a matter of not knowing these things. It's a matter of how do I get it across? how do I use words to condense so much information? And to condense it the best I can would be, they know what they're doing because they're purposely trying to channel that realm and bring it into the material realm. And so what we see now is splits in timelines, and you and I covered the majority split, right? We covered like it in a very simple way. One higher timeline, one lower timeline. In reality, there's so much more than one timeline, but these are to demonstrate ascension timelines and descension timelines. So the descension timelines, you're going to have some, and they're not going to be coming from the same source of others. I'll give you an example. You'll have some that are straight up trying to channel the dark entities into the physical realm, but you're also going to have some that went, hey, you guys, look, we made a huge error. Go back. So you're going to have so many different interactions, and they're not all going to be straight up demonic. They're going to be some trying to help navigate us so that we untie that at this choice point, if that makes sense. And so because of that, it's not so simple as like bad is bad, this is that. But if you follow, well, if you follow specifically who we call Elon's stream of consciousness thread, what's fueling or feeding his thought forms aren't the grays trying to warn humanity. It's actually the ones trying to aggressively create and send the momentum into creating that timeline. And with that, it's all sorts of cognitive dissonance. So it will look like it's disagreeing because it's in such a state of calcification. It's not the organized higher unity consciousness state. So it's going to look like it's like totally healthy if we don't understand that spiritual forces need to also be encompassed. So he talks a good talk, but you would be able to tell essentially at an energetic level if his actions would lead to a higher timeline if he had more spirit integrated. And where he's coming from, he's not coming from that integration. He's coming from purely harmonic, purely materialistic thought forms that are being fed from the, literally channeled from the eighth sphere, wanting to materialize fully in this world. Or what I guess Stranger Things beautifully was, I don't know if they were performing some sort of predictive programming through that show, but it certainly makes my job easier as a teacher to just say, hey, watch that show if you don't know what the eighth sphere is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the predictive programming, I've heard this concept, I believe it's called karmic retribution. And it is these people that are ushering in this dark energy, they know what they're doing spiritually is very, very bad. And they don't want that on their soul and on their conscious. So what they're doing is they're telling you what they're doing. And it's like if I gave you a poison apple and you ate it, that would be on my soul and I would be condemned. But if I gave you that apple and I said, here's a poison apple and you still ate it, my conscience is clear. I'm like, I told her it was poison. My karma is clear. And maybe on a spiritual level, that's what this predictive programming is. It's like, we're showing you what we're doing to you and you're still swallowing that pill, you know? Have you heard of that concept?
Yeah. I did a video on it and it became an underground classic. It's called How Our Consciousness is Used to Create Reality.
Oh, that's a good one.
And then other people did the video again. And it's fine if people got information from me. I'm not mad, because I get it. This is, we're all trying to build our brands. But when they shared that knowledge again from my video, they didn't say it right. And that was kind of like where there was an issue. So actually, maybe this is all a talk where I need to do another video on that topic. But
could be a good collab.
Huh?
Might be a good collab.
I would love to.
Yeah.
You just hit me up anytime you want to collab, by the way, because I don't want to bother you about that. But I'm always down.
Oh, I love it.
So with that, maybe it was me. Maybe I didn't do a good job clarifying that they're doing the hands clean not because they're worried about karma. They're purifying their hands only for the sake of the ritual itself. So they don't care about free will. They just know the way that the natural order of this universe is. I'm going to say, when I'm talking about the order of this universe, I'm going to use Maat, the Egyptian goddess, because Maat was of order. So if we're talking about like afterlife, going in there, balancing the scales of your heart, purifying your soul, all of that, that's Maat. So Ma'at is order. And then that's represented, as we know, like in its most easiest form to connect with, as karma. Karma shows there's a natural order. So Sarah could make up whatever she wants about what order is and what reality is and what truth is, and truth won't care. Order will still show me that through karma. So that's how you know that there is an objective truth. It's through the reflections we get of karma. And that gets even a little more complicated, but I won't get into the complexity of that. So there's karma. They know that. So they're not worried about like, oh, I have to clear my hands of karma. They're only abiding free will because free will is literally how they can do the ceremony. So you know how you said even earlier about how in Atlantis we typically think of technology only being masculine, but they were using feminine emotions?
Yes.
That's what I was calling loosh earlier. How they use a person's life force. My video on loosh explains it better than I could talk about it right now. But basically, loosh is the personal emotions. So if it's fear, it's not just fear. We know loosh through the term fear, though. If it's fear, that's emotional life force that we're feeding it. But we could also use loosh in a lot of different ways. And so they know how to manipulate our loosh for creating timelines. And so the karmic retribution is a concept where they are taking our loosh, our emotional energy to create things. And the only reason why it looks like they're afraid of karma, they're not afraid of karma, is that they have to obey free will in order for the creation to be in alignment with objective reality. Did that make sense?
Most of it made sense except for the connection to the free will part. How do they need to obey free will? Like, why do they care about free will?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So if they really cared about karma, they wouldn't be doing the things they do. So they don't really care about karma. Like they wouldn't be sacrificing people and torturing people if they truly cared about karma. The free will aspect of it is what needs to stay intact. So they have to tell us what they're doing, not because they're worried about their comeuppance, not because they're worried about cause and effect coming back to them. They have to tell us what they're doing because that's actually a part of the whole mass ritual. The whole mass ritual needs to have the awareness of it, because regardless of whether we know we're sovereign or not, and regardless of whether we know we have free will or not, they know it. They'll do everything to make it sound like we don't have it in front of us, but behind the scenes, they know it. And that's why information is occulted. They do the things that they demonize to the public. They make, astrology sound like you're a new age, demon-controlled person. They're doing that. They're doing both. They're doing everything. They're demonizing things that are of ancient knowledge in the front to scare people, but then behind it, they're doing all those things. So they know about free will and sovereignty, and the only reason why they're honoring that is for the ritual. The ritual needs to have that thing said because that's what will be able to make their ritual successful.
That's a very powerful concept that you just alluded to. And the discovery of the future was the first big discovery of humans, and that started separating us from animals. Animals don't really have a good abstract view of the future. They're kind of just like in the now, and they're very in that survival state. Whereas once humans discovered what the future is, they could start to negotiate with it to create the reality in the future that they wanted. And what they discovered is that if you sacrifice the present moment, you can have a better future. If you give up what you want now, you can have what you want most in the future. And I think this was symbolized by ancient civilizations when they were doing sacrificial rituals. They would sacrifice people or animals to the gods so that they could have a good harvest or good weather or, fill in the blank. And it seems like we look at that as very primitive today. We're like, oh my God, what were these barbarians doing sacrificing animals to the weather? Look how stupid they were. But here we are today doing all sorts of things that seem sacrificial to me for climate change, for like the weather. We have to kill all the cows. We have to get rid of all the cows. There was an article that just said that Ireland was going to kill all their cattle in the name of climate change because their farts were creating methane. And I'm like, I looked at this article and I was like, this is like an ancient ritual to the weather gods. Like in many ways, we are sacrificing people to some sort of future. It's like a negotiation or a contract with the future. I'm getting kind of out there right now, but I don't know if that idea made sense.
Yeah, no, it made a lot of sense. Like you're high level with this stuff, and you keep, like not knowing it, and that's good. But just so you know,
oh, thank you.
This is beautiful that you think this way. Yeah. And they're just, I don't know what more intelligence to add to that. So I like what you said. One thing I can add to that is it's so funny. It's insulting. I'm insulted when they come up with the excuses they do for their agenda, because they're so, at this point, it's not even trying to hide anymore. They just are aggressively pushing whatever their thing is. So, for instance, if it's climate change, it's not even about trying to talk about climate change in a way to get people and this, whatever. It's just a very aggressive gaslight, and it's a very aggressive campaign that then is quite fascist in its actions and in its approach. And this isn't because our climate isn't changing. Our climate is changing because we're moving into a different age and we're leaving the Kali Yuga. So yeah, our environment's changing, but the reasons and the way that it's being said, like slogans and stuff, and the way that they're portraying and framing this is around like a climate change. That is the whole facade. And you see this time and time again with anything. The military-industrial complex will take something, it will build an identity around it, and then it will have that identity being used to act out really fascist things.
Yes, they seem to love these invisible enemies that, that are endless, like the war on drugs. It's like this thing that you can fight forever. The war on terror. It's like it can go on forever. We can put infinite resources to it. And it's like, if you had $1 trillion, like, where would you spend it to fight this? War on COVID, war on climate. All these things are like these invisible enemies that give them, like you said, this narrative to just feed this agenda that they already have built out.
Yeah. And climate change is one of the most fundamentalist ones going on right now.
Yeah, well, if you look back at the climate, there's a lot of inconvenient evidence that shows that our climate was incredibly volatile way before we were firing those coal plants. Like, how did we get out of the ice age in 5 years? We just shot out of it. That was before there was industrial technology. How do you explain that? And those are things that, when they start all their graphs, they start it from like 150 years ago. But it's like, go back a little farther and you'll see that what we're in right now is not that extreme. We're actually in a period of quiescence.
In a what?
We're in a period of stability, basically.
That's interesting. Yeah, actually, I love Graham Hancock's work, even though I don't follow it. I love the stuff I've learned from his content. Something that is very important that I've learned from his content, and I've been able to, that aligns with mysticism, has been about ice ages and how before ice ages, it actually gets global warming, but it's not the way that it's portrayed. It's that, and I don't know the math behind this, but I'm sure he has articles on his website or something that can say the math of this. But basically, before ice ages, there's extreme, like whatever we're seeing when it comes to like global heat or just heat in general. And nobody would ever think that like that's a prelude to an ice age. But yeah, there's just a lot of things going on specifically with the weather that are trying to be the narratives around it twisted, and a lot of information occulted and hidden about it, so that then they can use whatever narrative they want about why the weather is the way it is and what they need to do about it.
Oh, exactly. Like in the 1980s, it was the next ice age was apparently coming. You'd see the cover of Time magazine saying, we're about to go into the next ice age. Then it was global warming, complete flip. And that didn't really work well because people like warm weather. So psychologically, we associate warm weather with good times. So people, they weren't afraid of, oh, it's going to get warmer? Sweet. Like, we're going to have nicer seasons. So now they've changed it to climate change because global warming, that term didn't really play out because we weren't supposed to have any ice by now. And it didn't scare people enough. But climate change also isn't really scaring people. So they're going to try to change it to like climate apocalypse, I think, or something scarier. But, it's just not something that gets people that afraid at this point. So I'm sure they're going to ramp that up. But
well, I live in California, and every time I try to move, I love the weather here too much to move. I'm ruined because I can't live anywhere else. So if there was global warming happening in the world, that would just be great. I wouldn't have to live in California.
Sweet. So one of the last things I wanted to talk to you about is just like how your life has changed, like how you're dealing with, you're probably getting recognized now and you have people coming to you for all these answers. Like how are you dealing with being like a guru to so many people?
So I take this as a very serious role. Like with great power comes great responsibility. And how I choose to demonstrate that is through my humanness. And I think that that's the most responsible way to reflect to somebody that they have permission to integrate. So sometimes people want to portray me as being too snarky or sassy. Well, that's my humanity, and I'm not going to not integrate that so that I can show everyone one-dimensional how to non-integrate and how to not perform alchemy on their soul. But then I get a lot of revere on the opposite end of that. And I always temper that with still, once again, the same thing. That's the medicine for the opposite end, is just my humanity. So constantly being transparent is how I deal with it. And it's also quite relieving to my spirit because I like being seen for who I am. I quite like that a lot. And that's actually why I couldn't go into acting at the end of the day. It's because I realized that I didn't want to act. No matter that I wanted a platform to be seen, I didn't want to act. I love truth. And because of that, it's effortless. It's not even hard. Maybe if I didn't come from my background in fourth way work and I wasn't used to learning how to be who I am, it would be hard. But for me, it's quite easy and effortless to just be seen, because that's going to repel some people. It's going to attract others. Everyone's going to have their own relationship to it. It might change over time. But no matter what, that's not up to me. My job, and I take it very seriously, is to make sure I'm transparent. Because people are false crystallizing in their egos by seeing reflections of leaders or gurus or spiritual teachers or anyone who they look up to be a facade. So it's okay if I'm showing a little too much of myself here. It's okay if I'm showing where I shine here. It's okay to own my divinity and my ancestral rage. Whatever it may be. And I'm not using this as an excuse to like abuse my audience. I don't. They'll just get like blocked if they're really abusive to me. So this isn't an excuse to like just be abusive to people, but I think always the remedy is being transparent, because then people can see themselves in you. And the disconnection that's caused so much conflict in the world is not being seen. So if I'm vulnerable enough to just be seen in my humanity, even if it doesn't look super divine in 1 second because I'm making a joke or I'm acting too much like a child or I'm acting too sassy, whatever it is, it's still giving people a point of reference. So even if they're like, well, I'm not that sassy, fine, whatever. It's still a medicine for the soul, because what has been lacking, that is transparency. So how I deal with all of this is that as a projector from human design, I feel immensely healed by how much I've been recognized. And I feel deeply grateful for the opportunity I have now to be recognized. That's been healing for me, because all projectors want is to be recognized, and we're not for everyone. Our aura penetrates other people's field, and that doesn't feel good. So we get projected on if we're not for a person. So because of that, projectors are told the advice of just wait till you're recognized, because you're going to be wasting your pearls of wisdom on people who don't value it, and it's going to make you bitter. So for me, I'm so grateful that I'm being healed through the act of being receiving the recognition that I get. But also how I give back to that is by being transparent, so that people can see their humanity through me and not just see this one-dimensional image of me portraying myself as some holy, enlightened, love and light spiritual guru.
I love that. You seem to really embody like this great energy of confidence and humility so well. And I think that's why your messages resonate with me. I also really appreciate how you use humor quite a bit, as I feel like that can get lost when you're like this guru all the time and everything has to be done this exact right way. You can forget about how important laughter is. And I love how on your Instagram, you're always posting like these funny memes that I'm resharing. I find them hilarious. And I think that you have to be able to laugh at yourself. You cannot take yourself seriously. There's so many people in the spiritual community that are like so smug, they're like sniffing their own farts. And you just got to laugh at them, right?
It's also not helping the audience. It's also hurting their soul.
Yeah.
I'm not even being dramatic. Like, I'm being serious. Like, the soul can't integrate if it has resistance to itself. So if you're getting reflections of, oh, that person's perfect and you're not like that, you're actually gaining fragmentation within your own being. So being transparent is healing me, and being transparent is helping people see themselves and heal them too.
I love that. Yeah, there was a time in my spiritual journey when I was not fun to be around because I was so serious. It was like at the peak of my veganness. I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian anymore, but I remember my friends are like, dude, we don't want to hear about the animal brutality anymore. We're done with it. You know, they just want to eat their KFC. But yeah. Anyways, yeah, I love how you, because you've gained like all this influence and power, and you talk about how you take it very seriously. How do you make sure that you don't get corrupted by this situation that you're in?
So this is something that's really interesting. I had this huge soliloquy or like a monologue to my brother the other day about this. I told him, this might just sound completely crazy, but I told him, You know why I was born into an angry lineage? He was like, why? Because I could stare at the sun and not be pulled into its gravity. I could stare in the moon. It's really the moon because I come from fourth way, and the moon is this huge reflection of everything unconscious in a person that will pull you into it. So for us, we were always like, oh no, we're going to be food for the moon. And it's like, don't be food. That's a huge esoteric saying, is you're food for the moon. It just means that your consciousness is not above the moon's karma. It will pull you into it. And there's just something about me. It was before this lifetime. That's for sure. It is effortless. It is not even something that's tempting. Like, let's say 20 people who were really popular were on one side of an equation. Let's call them the sun or moon, whichever one somebody has an affinity for. And let's say that they all believe something and they're growing in a tractor field and they're growing a lot of magnetism, and it could easily pull you in. If I am in integrity and they resonate, sure, I'll get pulled in. I'm not an ego about it. But if they are not, it is effortless for me to stay in my own gravitational field and not be pulled in. So when it comes to power, I guess a long way of saying that was, I can handle power. It's not tempting to me.
Well, that's really inspiring. And there's certain teachers that I think have done it quite well, who seem to have gotten massive and still have not changed. It still seem to be people of great integrity. I still really like Tony Robbins. I find him to be just like an awesome wealth of great advice constantly. I noticed one thing that he did though that was like a psychological trick. He came out with a series called I Am Not Your Guru. I Am Not Your Guru. And I'm like, Tony, you're smart enough to know that when you tell people that you're not their guru, they're instantly going to think that you're their guru. Like, he knows enough about psychology to know that the second you say that you're not something, people are going to think that you're that thing. So I'm like, that was very clever, Tony. But other than that, I think there's certain figures that have handled power quite well. And it's like the ancient Greek philosophers and Stoics said that he who does not want power is fit to hold it. And yeah, anytime you get somebody who really wants power, it kind of worries me. It's like, I think it stems from narcissism. And almost all our politicians are like huge narcissists. And yeah, it's time that we have people who don't want power to have some power. Yeah, I just wanted to ask you more on this vein about like, what's your view on money though? Like, do you feel like, do you have any conflict with like making merch or charging for events, or do you kind of just want to give it all out for free, or like, how do you put a price on it and still stay like, you got to eat to live. You got to live to eat.
This is such an attuned question. Like this is very conscious. Thank you for like seeing. A lot of people just assume that I'm this rich person and I'm scamming people because I have offerings and I ask a price for them. It's like, thank you for seeing my humanity. So my in-person events, they don't, I break even because I don't charge enough. People kind of like don't think about, air expenses, hotel expenses, the venue, audio, blah, 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 blah. They just think like there's a price tag on it. And my core audience, I love them. I love them. I'm not talking about the majority of people. So I'm just talking about the negative feedback I get. It's like, I actually break even when I go places. And it's just because I love doing it. I love doing it, and I can, because my energy healing practice is so outrageously successful. It's certainly not because I talk shit online. I don't get much money for talking shit online. So The energy healing practice is what generates all of my other projects. It is the financial backing for everything else. So I'm very grateful for my healing practice, because that's what gives me the freedom to be able to come out with the content I come out with. I'd still come out with the same content, but I wouldn't be able to do my events if I did not have that practice. And so that's where my abundance shines. And I feel like my sweatpants, bad business move. I'm still going to do it anyways. Why? Because my energy healing practice allows for me to have the resources to do it. My sweatpants are eco, so I don't make $1 off of them because they're already too expensive. No, I'm being exaggerative. I make like $10 off of them. That's an awful business move. Why would somebody continue doing that? Well, because I want to and I can. So I'm outrageously against slave worker, sweatshop labor, like outrageously. And I try not to come out as too outrageous in my video content, because that won't help. That's why even you like me. It's because I'm able to be very logical and articulate. And so when I'm buying sweatpants for my merch, yeah, they're expensive when you look at the rates of like slave shop sweatpants, those are cheaper. That's when people can make a profit. And I'm not judging anyone, because everything is that's why we need to pardon. Like, everything is so intricately fucked that you can't help it. You get why somebody's like, well, they need money, they're going to start a merch line, and they're not in the privilege that I have. So I think recognizing privilege is very important, not to bash ourselves or to whiplash ourselves, but to understand, because now we can extend that compassion to the rest of the world while we're helping to try to change it. So with all of that said, I find money to be something that the spiritual and conscious community has to integrate where they understand it in a responsible way. Right now, we're coming from too out of balance when we're talking about money and currency in general. We're coming from scarcity consciousness. We're coming from a bunch of blocks. We're coming from even ancestral blocks. We're coming from poverty consciousness. And then when we're giving teachings from that level, they're not helping anyone. They're trying to like shame and block a person, and then they become false light deception, because the false light feeds off of keeping you meek, keeping you in false humbleness, false humility, and poverty. So these teachings can easily just sneak up in the ego's back door when it comes to things that have some truth in them, like excess. But here's what I know for sure, and that's if a person is truly going through an awakening, they can handle money, and the money's not going to corrupt them. Like, if I won the lottery today, that I wouldn't like peace out and you'd see me inside the pool in my backyard in a mansion. I'm not against having large places to live either, that's cool. I'm not prude. I think people should be able to demonstrate their abundance in physical form. But my point is that if a person is awakened, they're going to not have such a strong resistance to currency. And they're also, once again, not going to become a Kardashian from it. Their ego isn't going to just eat themselves if they're truly being able to come from a higher level of consciousness. So once again, it comes to that middle way where a person can live and receive abundance and know that they're worthy of abundance. And yet in the external world, that would somehow even benefit others. Because I could tell you one thing, and that's if I won the lotto, do you even know how much stress I would get? Because I would start up leveling my projects and it would benefit people even times 10.
Well, I hope you win the lottery then.
Ah!
Yeah, that is a great perspective on money. And it's hard to know what the right balance is, because like money is energy, and like there are certain people that are going to just live off grid and be like, money's at the root of all evil. I don't think it's the root of all evil. In some ways, I think it brings out the best in you, but it also can corrupt you and make you very materialistic. But I haven't seen on your channel, like, you don't seem to take any sponsors. I haven't even heard you like promote your events, which, yeah.
My message is so important to me that people will use anything to discredit me. And I care more about the message. So I get contacted all the time for everything. Even my energy healing services, I don't need them to be promoted. I am a vastly popular, or I guess you could say, I'm a huge energy healer. So because of that, that's my driving force. And so I don't want to taint my message if somebody won't receive it, because now they're skeptical. But I will say this for my brothers and sisters. It is so horrible what they have to go through, because people become so entitled that if somebody has a sponsor, all of a sudden they should be discredited. I feel awful for the people who don't have an energy healing practice, who could fund all of their stuff and who's abundant, because they still put so much work and energy and their own life journey into learning something to share, and they're not allowed to ask for a fair compensation. Or even, let's forget fair. Let's say that they got abnormally, oh, God forbid, they got abnormally promoted. Like, I just feel like people get too much crap. And even though I have the privilege, I recognize I'm privileged, I don't need to do that, I still find that that's very wrong. And I am hurt for the people who do need to get paid off of their stuff, and they're getting a lot of flack for it and shamed.
Yeah, I just did a video about morality and kind of like the core essence of what moral behavior is. And the conclusion is that if somebody is your end and you do a bunch of things for them, that is moral. But if you use somebody as a means to your end, you are using that person, and that is immoral. So the example given in the video was, if I go out and get a burrito for my wife to make her happy, that is moral. But if I go out and get a burrito for her so she'll have sex with me, that makes people squirm, and they're like, wait, you're using her. And I think that rule can be overlaid onto anything. And when you look at marketing and advertising and money, it's hard because you are using people for a means to an end. That is not the person. The person is not always your end. It could be a really good service, but when you're like, buy my merch, or like, check out the sponsor, there is a little bit of a moral conflict there, because you are using the people a little bit as a means to an end. But conversely, I didn't take sponsors for several years. And I was thinking, like, look at me. I'm so like this is art and it's pure. And like, I wouldn't interrupt a video with like a sponsor, because that would ruin the art. And I still feel that way. But never once in the history of my entire YouTube have I ever seen a comment that said, thank you for not taking sponsors. And so like when I have put a few sponsors in, and nobody's like really complaining that much. So it seems like people, for the most part, don't really care that much, unless it's an egregious sponsor. I did do a sponsor with Manscaped at one point, and people were like, what the hell? Manscaped? It's like a adult shaver company. Yeah, but you got to make money somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, so this is a very good topic, actually. This is very good. I should do some videos on things like this, because this is a very practical navigating too. So when I was talking about everything that I was talking about, I was actually located in the higher timeline. In the higher timeline, people are collaborating and there's synergy, meaning that if I really love a product, and this happens with everyone, this will happen with you. You just even said an example of how it happened. People care about health. That's like just a given. If a person is conscious, they care about health. So there's always like this synergy that could be beautiful between like, I really stand behind this product and I would benefit from them by promoting it. That's full integrity. There's nothing wrong there. That's how the new earth gets created. you're not going to get to the new earth through poverty consciousness. It would be through like, hey, you're in that field doing that one thing, and this is how I can benefit you, and this is how you can benefit me. That's called a symbiotic organism. So that's where I was located when I was saying everything that I was saying. But you were right, because for once in my life, I wasn't going to the dark place. Darker, in an ego location, they only care about putting out, churning out content so that it can fuel their business, and they're treating it as such. They're treating it just like, look, this is the best for my business. They're just churning out nonsense. So in that case, they're not caring about alignment or the synergy of a brand, and therefore their actions are more self oriented, because it's about, oh, that was good for my wallet. That wasn't actually the best resource to give out to the public, but that was really good choice for my wallet. So absolutely.
Yeah, everything you were just saying really resonates. I have a book that I wanted, a really high quality book, but then once you get a high quality book, it makes the price astronomical. So I only make about less than $1 per book. And I just want people to have it. I often just like give out boxes of the books to schools and stores just because I want them to have it. And, you know, at my expense, thousands and thousands of dollars, but I just want that book to get out there. And I don't know. I don't know where I'm going there, but another question I was curious about.
That's beautiful.
With your channel is, what's the breakdown of like men and women coming to your events and on your channel? Like, is it pretty 50-50, or what's the breakdown?
It's 50-50. So when I first started my channel, I don't check the stats for gender anymore. Like ongoing, like I'll do like maybe like a quarterly breakdown of my analytics. But before, I was like discovering the studio thing. So I started looking at that a lot. And now I've kind of like desensitized to the studio stuff. But before, I noticed what kind of like made me curious was I was getting like a far larger percentage of women. That's not like curious meaning that like in a weird way because I'm a woman. But to me, it was curious only because I'm used to being in the esoteric field. So when I came onto YouTube, I was still used to my Instagram mind. And the Instagram mind was overly dominant in male. But everything changes when you say your face and you're a real person and you're making far different content than just still images with other people's captions. So you can't even compare the two. So I was like, oh, I have a far larger female audience. And that started putting me personally in a role where now I started feeling like, it's like, Sarah, it doesn't matter whatever you are, like whatever you think about yourself being a leader feminine, you are. So you could say all you want that, oh no, I'm in the esoteric field. No, I should, whatever. None of that matters, because the truth is, look at your stats. You are a female leader. So because of that, I felt a lot like my heart space opened. My heart space felt like, I want to hold more space. So anyways, it just made me more energetically feminine, which, I mean, that was just a tangent. So back to my analytics. Now they're 50-50.
On YouTube?
Yeah.
Because YouTube is very male dominated. I think it's like 80% or 75% male. So that's...
No way.
That's an unusually high number of females, considering that the demographic of YouTube at large is mostly male.
Well, what I've learned, and this isn't just my opinion, this is the feedback I've gotten. This is the truth of everything, not just my own information and my own intuition, but also what I'm hearing and sensing from the stats, from in-person events, from my clients, everything. It's that the world apparently is starved for females in their power, but not power in the way that we think of power in the exoteric sphere. Every time I refer to power, I'm talking about like David Hawkins' book on power versus force versus power. I'm talking about power from a very esoteric level. Power is essential. So what I've noticed is that women don't have enough models of what it looks like for a female to be in their power in the way that I'm talking about power. And so that's why that's why so many women look up to me. It's because they're learning from me and I'm broadcasting to them how to be in your power. And so obviously different women are going to be able to convey that through their own personal feminine energy. My feminine energy isn't, let's call it an Aphrodite, shall we say. So I'm not the only way that feminine energy can be in her power, but I can be for Sarah and what my archetype is in her power. So I'm not even trying to limit the feminine in all of the ways that the feminine can be feminine. I'm just simply talking about femininity through Sarah's femininity. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. I think in our culture we've got confused with we've conflated masculinity and power, and so a lot of women and media portray women acting like men in order to seem powerful. You know, like all our movies are showing women fighting men now and they're beating them up, and it's like having a woman act like an insecure male does not make her powerful, or that doesn't solve anything. Like, we can celebrate femininity and honor that power. We don't have to have women act like men. Does that make sense?
No, that makes absolute sense. I'm not confused about that at all. But back in my day, we had Angelina Jolie fighting things, and it was quite sexy. So I am actually very removed from what's going on in the world when it comes to movies or things like that. So I wish if you have an example, because now I'm just curious.
Well, I love movies, and there are plenty of movies that have strong female characters that I resonate with. Like Kill Bill is one of my favorite movies. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh my God, that's my favorite movie.
Really? Kill Bill is awesome.
My favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now a lot of the movies, just like the main characters seem driven by resentment more than gratitude. So it's hard for me to even know if they're the good person or the villain. I'm like, they're killing a bunch of people because they're resentful. It seems like a villain to me. They're not like learning their lessons. You know, villains and protagonists are mirrors of each other. They both started with trauma, and they are reflections of one another. The villain, however, does not learn from their trauma. The good character does, and they grow and evolve and develop, whereas the villain harbors resentment and tries to get revenge or projects out on the world. So that's the difference between a villain and a protagonist. And it seems like a lot of movies have these really resentful, bitter characters that are just hurting people, and it seems like they're not learning any lessons. There's no character development. So, but one of my final questions, I'm curious to know what divine, healthy femininity looks like to you.
Yeah. And so really quick to piggyback off of that last thing you said, do you remember how like a few months ago I was talking about Mars and how I was doing all this research on Mars?
Refresh my memory.
So there's a very strong, I know I was talking about Armand earlier, but there is an over masculinization impulse. And some mystics have traced it back to, now I might lose people. There's this Mars emphasis. There's this heavily Mars impulse. And it didn't even come from Mars. The asteroid belt became the asteroid belt because that was once a planet. And that planet was destroyed by the same group that went to Mars and then now is here on Earth. So there's this pattern going on. And what that pattern is destroy use narcissism to conquer, use narcissism to dominate, use narcissism to over masculinize everything. And then when it eats its own tail and it gets destroyed, leave ship, go to a new planet. Never learn the lessons, stop, integrate. It's this over masculinization impulse. And it's really the best way, if somebody like wants to truly track this, is I would say Robert Seffers. He's an anthropologist. I think he's much more than that. I have my suspicions, but he's an anthropologist. He has an amazing YouTube channel where he talks about Rh negative bloodlines and how the feminine, the goddess, has been completely demoted, just abolished in every way possible, even to over masculinize women. And I'm coming from somebody who's straight up integrated. I'm not a woman who is girly. So when I'm saying this, I am not telling women that I'm all about integration. I'm not your hype girl. I'm here to teach alchemy. So, but what I'm talking about with the feminine is the feminine power as this cosmic force, and that what we know as Shakti. Robert Seffer talks about how the feminine force is of enlightenment, and that was purposely dominated because there's this conqueror trail that has dated back far even before the asteroid belt was a destroyed planet. This is just, Earth isn't the first time that we're seeing this pattern of conquering and dominating and trying to erase the feminine. So that said, what was the question?
What does healthy divine femininity look like?
Oh, okay. That's why I was talking about this. So healthy divine femininity is wisdom. So even if a person falls under this, this is my archetype.
Oh, who is that?
That's the high priestess.
Oh, great.
So she's not necessarily going to be the empress now, is she? She's not going to be... well, I would also say I'm Queen of Wands. No, I'm Queen of Wands for sure. I'm assuming you know all this because of your fiance.
I'm ashamed to say I know what you're talking about, but I don't know what that represents.
Oh, okay.
Tarot, though.
So... Yeah, so it's just pure wisdom. It's like borderline androgynous because it's just pure wisdom. But that's not the only form of femininity. So I want to honor that. I'm not going to just paint femininity as my archetype, because femininity is actually in its highest state before it starts getting into archetypes. It's what Gnosticism knows as Barbelo. Barbelo was the original prototype of Hermes, Trismegistus. She was known as the thrice great before we knew Hermes to be a thrice great. But they're not in conflict. They're actually just a part of the same story. So they're actually, you could look at it like extensions of one another. Thrice great was just a name that was bestowed upon someone who was so enlightened. It was thrice. That's like how we use slang today to say something. It would be like, oh man, that's so thrice. So that's why thrice, Trismegistus got that. Well, Barbelo was known as the thrice great. And what she is everything. So that's what we call the mystery. So femininity is going through this huge evolutionary identity crisis right now. And what it's going, we look at it like it's the feminine against the masculine, but actually, it's actually the feminine against the feminine in front of a mirror going, what am I? And one is fighting the other. One is saying, I'm this. And the other one is saying, no, I'm this. And then another one is saying, well, I'm a man. And the other one is saying, no, I'm this. And it's because the feminine energy is everything. She's the mystery. The masculine energy is actually what organizes her and defines her. So without the masculine energy, She's figuring out what she is because she's everything. So in its highest sense, what is feminine energy? Feminine energy is all. Now, once we start organizing that, we can start looking at it through Masonic lineages or occult lineages. Well, it's the heart center. The heart center means a clear indication is inclusiveness and compassion. But do you see how inclusiveness is everything?
You are blowing my mind right now in many ways. And I love to see things in geometry. And when you were describing that, how feminine energy is everything, it reminds me of like how the universe was created out of sacred geometry. It first started with curved lines. It's all curved lines, and I have the flower of life right here. This is an entirely feminine shape. It's all curved lines. And so this was the first, this is out of this, the fabric of reality emerges. And then you add masculine energy on top of that by connecting all the intersecting points. And so this is how out of like the formless, you get form. Because once you bring in the masculine energy with a ruler, straight edge, and connecting all the dots, you then get the platonic solids, which form the foundation of all the everything we see on the periodic table of elements. And you can see it in flowers and in small cells and viruses and everything. All that small life form stems from sacred geometry. And it starts with the feminine, and then the masculine goes over it to give it form from the formless. So that's what you just reminded me of.
That's exactly like you described it in sacred geometry. So the feminine is all. Like, one thing that I sacrifice for my channel, and I don't like using the word sacrifice because I find it to be manipulative, but it's true. I sacrifice wearing vests. I like dressing a little bit more integrated. And as a child, I always wanted to wear vests, and we were too poor. And also my mom really was fixated on me being girly. And so I never got to wear vests. And so, like I grew up and I started wearing vests too much. But then once I got that freedom, I didn't want to wear vests that much. And I wanted to be more integrated. So actually, once I got to dress super masculine, I like didn't want to anymore. Like now I just like dressing very like integrated. So I sacrifice not wearing vests on my channel simply because we're in a time where like nobody has an attention span. Like if you're wearing a vest, oh my God, you have a dark agenda, or I might lose resonance with someone who I'm trying to hold space for. So for me, like the only time I've ever done anything where it was because I care more about the message getting across, it's just because there's like a hyper polarization going on. The spiritual community is becoming very conservative leaning, and I get why. The left has given us no option. They've become so they've just deteriorated. So, and I'm not for either, but I'm just saying that I understand why we're more right-leaning at the time is because the left just don't make no sense. But because of that, there's this like really inflamed tone, and I don't wish to add more inflammation to that fire that I wish to put out. So because of that, long story short, the feminine is everything. And what it comes down to is inclusivity and multiplicity. So if the feminine is inclusive because she's everything, then how that would be at a more relatable level, at a more body level, at a more esoteric Masonic level, that would be the heart. So how that would transfer over in a way that makes sense to us, because the feminine is nonsense. She don't make no sense. The masculine makes sense. The feminine don't make sense. How that translates is the heart, because the heart is compassion for seeing all the others. So the heart is inclusive. Now we need that tempered in this age with the masculine of discernment, because if we take that logic too far of non-logic, well, now we'll just go down a degenerative pathway of timeline because we were too subjective. We're going, oh, there's no rules. Oh, there's no this. Oh, there's no that. So discernment is needed to help temper and guide that compassion.
That's beautiful. And it reminds me of a concept from Ram Dass about the two conflicting forces in spirituality. One is that there's suffering everywhere and your heart has to break for all the suffering, and that's your humanity. And on the other side, you see that it's all perfect. Everything's created by God, and all the suffering is part of this higher order. And it's like, how can you hold both those views at the same time? You have to have them both, because if you're all unbalanced on the one side, if you see the suffering everywhere and your heart is constantly breaking, life is going to be unbearable and you're not going to be able to get anything done. And you're always going to be just crying because the suffering is endless. And on the other side, if you just see everything as perfect, you don't have any humanity. Somebody can fall right in front of you and you're saying, oh, it's all part of the higher order. It's like, no, you have to have humanity. You got to get down on one knee and help that person. But so whenever I'm giving people advice, I can always see like what side they're leaning too far on. So if they're really down, I try to tell them, hey, look, this is all part of some greater lesson that's going to make you better. We're going to look back on this in a year and you're going to say this was the most important pivotal moment for you. And if somebody's kind of becoming like a psychopath and they're like, oh, it doesn't matter if that was made in a sweatshop or who cares? Like, I'm like, hey man, like you need to kind of come back down to earth a bit. But usually it's the earlier one. Usually it's somebody who's horribly hurt and they're devastated. And I'm trying to make them see, hey, look, this is all part of some higher order and this is going to be good for you in the end. Usually that's more of the advice I'm giving. But, you can't give that advice right away. Like if my friend got cheated on or something, I can't immediately say, oh, this is going to be good for you. You have to start by giving him some sympathy. You have to like read the room. But, every situation calls for a different degree of that energy. But it's helped me a lot to hold both those views in my heart at the same time.
Well, you're just a good leader. That everything you described is like exactly what is a leader. You're attuned to what's going on, knowing that they're separate, knowing that people are separate, the context is separate, everything's separate. So you're tuning in to what the best medicine you can provide out of all of your wisdom, all of your medicine base. What is the medicine to give them in that time? That is that's the optimal form of leadership.
Oh, I appreciate that. And you have that too. I really admire what you do, like getting up on stage and running these retreats. That's tough. Do you have like a whole team that works with you?
No, I just have a few people. And the retreats I love because I basically just go off. There's 2 days of fun, 2 days of what I would consider hard work for me because I'm tuning in constantly to the people individually and then helping them. And so it's just a lot of like using my own gnosis and my own ability to synthesize things. So I guess we could call that channeling. It's just a lot of channeling that goes on for 2 days straight. Even during lunch and dinners, I'm with them the whole time. So, and then the other 2 days, there's still the whole channeling and personalization that goes on, but they're just easier things we're doing for the events, like a cacao ceremony or like we're on a hike or things like that. But it's still, for me, I don't stop the whole time we're on the retreat. So it's hard work for me, but I love doing it. So it's hard work, but it's also innate to me. For the in-person events, those take an enormous amount of planning. Those have so many different elements into it. And I started getting burnout by doing my in-person events, taking that on. So I've learned now things that like people have whole teams for. I'm finally like, oh, okay. So that person figures that out. Okay. All right. Oh yeah. If I hire that person, then they'll figure that out. Cause I'm at the point now where I have to start focusing on my books and learning how to just have teams for everything.
Well, hopefully you don't just make AI do the whole thing.
No.
No, okay.
There's one thing that no one has to worry about. I won't be doing AI to do that. But if AI should come right in front of my face, it will probably want to make out with me. I'm not scared of it.
Right on. I would really like to connect you with my fiance because you guys are so different, but you both embody like this divine, strong female energy so well. And she's doing retreats as well. And I'm sure they're like way different than her audience is like 95% younger girls. And it's really into like the tarot manifestation astrology realm. But she does like sound bowl healing and yoga and all these things. And she's been trying to do she's done retreats, but she's trying to do more. And yeah, I think you guys would get along. You guys would probably talk for like 10 hours.
I want to talk to your fiance so bad about tarot. I have so many questions. And yeah, she's a powerhouse. She's like a feminine powerhouse.
Yeah, she's great. And we're getting married in a few weeks. So
congratulations. I'm so excited.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just going to be us in the forest. So,
okay, but don't forget to invite me sometime this summer to the forest because I want to go camping.
We'll do the official ceremony at your retreat. Yeah. Yeah. So I think this was a amazing podcast. This is like, I think almost my longest one. So, you know, my brain like almost ran out of things to talk about for a second. And then it like came back online and like got a second wind of energy. So yeah, I'm really excited to finish up our collaboration. I think it's going to be a huge hit and I'm always down to collaborate anytime.
Oh, likewise. Like I said, anytime you want to collab, just hit me up.
Hell yeah. And I hope we meet in person soon.
I'm counting on that.
Definitely. All right. This has been an amazing podcast. If you want to find Sarah, the Alchemist, where can people find you?
You can find me at my website, thealchemist.community. There you can sign up for my newsletter, or you could check out my articles. You could see my in-person events and then get directed to my social media. So my social media on YouTube, you could find me at The Alchemist if I'm not hidden, which sometimes tell me I'm hidden.
Yeah. I think we're all being shadow banned a little bit, but